Okay, well, we'll call to order this meeting, special meeting of the Finance Committee. Bill, will you do the roll call, please?
Sorry, I'm just trying to fix my audio here. Okay, roll call. Wilkos,
Here.
Nairo,
Here.
Lorman,
Here.
and I believe Alder Jackson is intending to call or Zoom in. He is not connected yet, however.
Okay. And we are recording, correct?
Correct.
Great. All right. Well, of course, this is our special budget meeting. This is possibly, maybe definitely the most important activity for the city and all of us. So it's exciting to kick it off now. And we'll start with Bill giving us an overview. And then we'll go into hearing from the various different departments. Now, and I see that the mayor is on the Zoom.
Yeah, thank you. Before I dive into the presentation, I just wanted to highlight that budget documents are available on the city website. To get to those, you would navigate first to departments and then finance, budget, and budget documents. And we have the current budget that we're working on 2024 listed at the top. There are 3 documents there. The first is a copy of the presentation that I'll be going through shortly. Then the capital budget briefing book, which includes the department capital requests and narratives. And then the 2024 operating budget briefing book, including the department narratives, requests, line items, and what we're calling budget initiatives as the new or changed items requested this year. I did want to note that there are some updates to the capital and the operating budget book that were just uploaded earlier today as we got additional information in prepared from departments. So we will keep the ones on the website always the most current version if there are updates. We're also anticipating that we will have a proposed executive budget coming out prior to the meeting on October 3rd, and we would be providing that information here on the website as well and letting you know when that information is posted. Okay. Let's switch over to the presentation here. Okay, so I want to take the first 15 minutes or so to go through kind of an overview of the plan for the meeting tonight and the overall of the budget as requested by the departments. So I'll try to keep that to about 15 minutes. And then we have department presentations with about 10 minutes scheduled for each department for the rest of the evening, planning to wrap up at 9 o'clock. We'll have a lot of departments we're going through. So we've asked departments to keep their presentations brief, focusing on their primary goals, perhaps highlighting a couple of their most significant issues or initiatives and allowing some brief time for questions. If there are additional questions, we'll be taking that information or they can be submitted separately and we will work with departments to follow up and get that information and send it out to the full finance committee. As we talk about the city budget, it includes a number of different funds of various types. Our focus during the budget process ends up being on the general fund, which is our largest and the fund where most operating departments and that is also a fund that is funded primarily by property tax with some revenue coming from many other sources, with some of the other larger sources being state aids and charges for services. So many of the departments that we'll hear from tonight have their department budgets within the city's general fund. But I did want to mention and highlight that there are other city funds as well. Some departments that have a significant dedicated revenue source are budgeted in a special revenue fund where the revenues and expenditures for that function are within their own fund and balances stay within that fund if there's any excess balance at the end of the year. That could include examples like tourism, which is fully funded with hotel room tax, or departments that receive separate funding, such as the library that receives Dane County funding, but also receives support from the general fund. We have enterprise funds that operate like utilities or businesses, including our utilities, golf course, and airport. And then we also have a capital projects fund that includes projects that are funded primarily with borrowing, or we have capital project funds for TIF districts. and then a debt service fund to make payments on those. Looking first at the capital budget, we focus a lot on our capital borrowing that is supported by property taxes. So as we get into the capital budget, some departments have items that are funded within their own revenue source. For example, would be water and sewer utilities that have dedicated revenue to pay for their capital. But many departments have general capital requests, which is funded by borrowing supported by the property tax levy. And the amount of general capital borrowing the city has done each year has varied. This slide shows the history over the last 5 years. And on average, the target has been around 4 million. A couple of years have been higher, particularly due to stormwater projects or stormwater recovery projects in the Pheasant Branch Creek. And as we look at our debt service projections each year, we've been using $4 million as the average annual capital borrowing to put together our projections of future debt service. And the graph on the right is an excerpt from the debt service budget showing our various types of outstanding general debt, showing the additional borrowing at $4 million per year layered on top of that, and a projection for about a 3% increase in the debt service levy and tax rate each year at that level. Other levels can be chosen for general capital borrowing, but that would be consistent with the prior history that we have and the projections we've looked at going forward. So when we look at the requested capital budgets, there's a total of $21 million in all of the capital requests for 2024. A lot of that includes utility or TIF district funded projects. When we look at just those that would be funded with that general capital borrowing, there's just under $4.9 million in requests for 2024. And this slide goes through and shows where the items are by department or major area with what the funding level was in 2023, and then the requested amounts for 2024. So as presented and requested, we'd be about $900,000, $860,000 over that $4 million target if the intent is to stay at that level. Just want to note for the record that Alder Jackson has joined the Zoom at this point. Moving from capital over to the operating budget and specifically looking at the city's general fund, we have a total of additional revenues projected at this point of $779,000, or an increase of about 3.1% if we exclude transit. And the reason why I've excluded transit is the city has a contract with Madison Metro for transit service. Beginning in 2023, the city is receiving direct state aid funding to pay for a large portion of that transit cost. And we've had discussions about potentially moving that out of the city's general fund and setting that up as a special revenue fund because there is that large dedicated source. So for comparison purposes, I have backed both the transit expenses and revenues out of these comparisons to have more of a true comparison of just what the net operating costs are for the general fund. So excluding that transit fund item, revenues would be going up about 3.1%. As requested, we have significantly more budget requests than that revenue increase. The total expenditure increase requested for the general fund is $2.2 million, or a 9.1% increase. That includes a base budget increase of 2.7%. Base budget is essentially our costs to continue based on authorized staffing levels, anticipated wage and benefit costs, and current operating items. There's another $835,000 in personnel initiatives, and then a little over $700,000 in other operating initiatives that are included in the budget. So the starting point, if we take the projected revenues minus all of the requested expenditures, is we have a gap of about $1.5 million. And I would say at this point in the process, it is typical that there is a large gap between revenues and requests from the departments. And that's part of the process that staff and finance committee and ultimately the council go through of how to bring those two into balance with the limited resources we have. Just want to touch on a couple of the key revenues. I've listed some of the key items on this slide, and two that I wanted to call out specifically. The first line is property taxes. That's the largest revenue source that funds almost 2/3 of our general fund budget. And that growth is limited by property tax levy limits, which are limited to the rate of net new construction. And as you know, our net new construction for this year, unfortunately, is lower than it has been in average. It's only 1.1%, where our average has been closer to 2.5%. That means that our property tax levy can only grow by 171,000 for the general fund, about a $24 to $25 million fund. So that's not a lot of increase for the property tax revenue. The other item that is helping us significantly this year is the additional state shared revenue. And this is the additional funding that was approved by the legislature earlier this year and included in the state budget. And Middleton is expecting to get just under $542,000 in additional supplemental aid from that shared revenue, which is a significant increase in shared revenue. It definitely will help us overall with our budget. But even with that additional aid, when we look at some of the other changes in our revenues, overall, we are looking at, if we take out the transit aid, that $779,000 increase in net revenues available for general fund operations. Looking at the expenditure side, first looking at what we're calling the base budget. As I mentioned, that represents currently authorized staffing positions. The assumptions that we've made for the non-union staff is the market adjustments per our established program for movement through the ranges, as well as a proposed 3.5% cost of living adjustment. And that is based on the recommendation from our HR manager looking at changes in the employment cost index through the first 2 quarters of this year. Before we finalize the budget process, we'll have 1 more quarter of data from that employee cost index, but that is what we're recommending in order to try to stay competitive with where government wages are currently. We also have existing collective bargaining agreements for the police and EMS units. Those have cost of living adjustments in the contract of 3% and 2.5%, as well as steps for employees moving through the ranges as negotiated by those contracts. At this point, we finalized our health insurance renewal. We know that's a 6.4% increase. That is under what our maximum cap could have been. So that's in a sense good news, but is obviously increasing faster than our rate of revenue growth. We have no change in our dental insurance premium. There are some increases in Wisconsin retirement system rates that are factored into the budget. And then for purposes of the base budget, operating line items are starting at their current 2023 budget levels. So when we add all of those items together, that's about a $636,000 increase, or about 2.7% over the prior year budget. The next category is personnel initiatives. So this is additional staffing or adjustments to wages being requested for departments either in the general fund or receiving support from the general fund. We have a total of 8.35 full-time equivalent positions that are requested. Those are listed out by department and the specific items. And each of these will have a budget initiative sheet that provides details on the cost for the position and the explanation and justification. In total, all of these positions add to $835,000. I just want to note that library is included here because the library, while it is a separate fund, they do receive a large amount of their support from the general fund. So it does ultimately impact their property taxes and the overall general fund revenues. And then we also have several operating initiatives, and these are listed by function and department. And again, there's detailed information on the budget initiatives and these requested changes in each of the department pages in the budget. But in total, that adds up to about another $700,000. So kind of putting that at context, we'll hear from the departments on hitting their highlights. That'll be taking place this evening. We'll hear from all the major departments. The plan then is to continue working on a proposed executive budget, working with the mayor and city administrator and the administrative team, and having that available for your consideration on October 3rd. Our intention would be to try to start the finance committee early that evening and limit other agenda items to have time to present that proposed budget and allow the finance committee to start budget deliberations and diving into the budget and adjustments that the finance committee would like to see. We've tentatively identified a potential additional meeting date on October 11th. That date is not finalized yet, but we're proposing that as a possible date if it's needed based on where the finance committee is after the discussion on October 3rd. And then the Finance Committee would also have the ability on their regular meeting night on the 17th to potentially try to start early for additional budget discussions, to try to finalize the Finance Committee recommended budget and set a date for the public hearing and approve the public hearing notice. Following that, there is a period of time when we need to publish the notice and have that published for at least 15 days before we can hold the public hearing. So we'd be looking at a meeting the week of November 13th for that, a special council meeting on the budget public hearing. Tentatively looking at October 15th or 16th as dates. That would be a Wednesday or Thursday. I understand there's some potential conflicts on the 15th, so we may be looking at the 16th if that date works better for the majority of the members. And the intent that night would be to both hold the public hearing and for discussion of council budget amendments. And then the planned date for council action on the budget would be November 21st.
Bill, I just want to provide a little bit of context on the executive budget process. So that's something that's new to our budget process. We haven't done that before in typical budget years. We've kind of just given the Finance Committee all this information, kind of asked that you wade through the needs and wants versus the resources that are there. The purpose of the executive budget is to try to take at least a first crack at balancing that budget, given the needs of the community versus the resources that we have available. So that gives this body something to start with your conversation on October 3rd, rather than kind of focusing in on individual line items that may not move the needle as much as kind of the larger ticket deliberative items. So this is something new. We're going to try this, but again, the goal is to kind of give you a budget that is a scenario at which we balance the budget. And that's something that this body can react to, make changes to, and then that would ultimately get forwarded on to the city council.
Brian, is that something that you work on with the mayor, or is that something? Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, at this point, that wraps up the overview presentation. If there's any overall questions, I'd be happy to take those. If there's any comments on the schedule or process, we can discuss that before moving into the first department.
I just had a question about the $4 million borrowing. I won't say it's a limit, but target, I'll call it. Is that in a policy anywhere, or is that just been the practice?
That is not in a policy. We do have a debt management policy that sets some metrics for outstanding debt per capita portion of our debt limit, targeting for what portion of our property tax levy goes for debt service. We are doing very well with all of those metrics. So we're within the policy guidelines, and that's something that we can update and send out those metrics for you. I'd say the 4 million has been more of a practice and target that the council has set. And I think that's been on a desire to limit the property tax impact more so than those specific measures. But that is something that there is flexibility that we don't have to come in at 4 million. That's just been a goal in recent budgets.
Yeah, well, because looking ahead a couple of years, it looks like it's going to almost double, at least according to the 5-year capital plan.
Yeah, and I should add too that the city over the last few years has had rapid repayment of its debt. So even though some of our projects would be eligible to be financed over 20 years, we've been issuing debt for a total of 8 years. And the purpose of that has been to continue to rapidly repay these annual operating borrowings that helps us free up future debt capacity. So that going back to that slide, there's kind of steady increases planned at about 3% per year. But then as some of our current facility debt starts to be paid off for the MOC and for the fire and EMS facilities, that potentially opens up additional capacity if there would be other larger either facility or more one-time items rather than the annual capital borrowing.
Any other questions at this time? Jeff Alder Jackson on the phone. Do you have any questions?
Not at the moment.
Okay, thanks. All right. Thank you, Bill.
Okay, then we can transition to the department presentations, and the first department we have is the senior center.
And Tammy, when you get up there, please make sure the microphone is on, and welcome.
And just for the departments as you're presenting, we will have the portions of the budget books available and indicate the page numbers for anyone that's interested in following along. So the senior center is on page 139 of the budget briefing book.
Operating, right?
Operating, yes. Thank you.
That's good. Okay. Ready?
Yes.
I just want to run down the decision items very quickly and talk a little bit about some of our 2024 goals and finishing up talking about significant building issues that the senior center has focused on in this budget. I've requested a little increase in postage to cover the costs of our newsletter and also to cover the costs of more people requesting the newsletter. It seems to go up every month. We have adjusted a couple of items here. We've adjusted the trip budget. We've adjusted the classes budget, but keep in mind that all of that is offset by revenue for both of those things. Also, we requested a small $500 increase for being able to honor our volunteers. Of course, those special dinners have gotten more expensive, as we all know, budget-wise. We also looked at the utility budget and increased that a little bit by about $2,000 in the request just to meet basic utility increases and costs. 2024, we're looking forward to obviously continued program development that will enrich the lives of all residents in an inclusive and equitable way at the senior center. We're looking to solidify the front desk experience. We've been working on that in 2023. We're looking for a situation that's more user-friendly and focused on customer service. We also want to provide more opportunities for participants to give input into the program and the facility. We've done a lot of that in 2023, and you'll start to see those survey results coming out. I think I talked about that a little bit to the full council previously, but you'll see it actually posted on our website. We're looking to improve and expand special events and programming and building a more of a planned giving program through our endowment fund is also very much on one of the key issues that we're looking at. But I wanted to talk tonight about significant issues with the building itself. The senior center does not have a capital budget. So you're going to see a presentation from Jim Solander that will detail everything that I'm talking about here tonight. Obviously, we know that we have a renovated bank that was never originally built to be a senior center, but it's a wonderful home for our program, but we do have a few issues to take care of. We do have some leaks in the roof and the flashing system of 2 areas of the senior center. One area is actually leaking over the laminated floor system, which is in the Hubbard Activity Center. And you may hear Kylie talk about that later on. Luckily, at least for us, we didn't get a lot of rain this year. So we didn't have a lot of that water pooling in the basement of the senior center. But that leaky roof does need to be taken care of. More than likely, it's coming from the glass block. And again, Jim will talk about that. We mentioned in last year's budget the electrical issues in the dining room, and we're looking to possibly rewire that dining room to make those circuits safer and also to allow us to do some additional programming in that area. CIVMIC, the city's insurance company, did point out some electrical issues on their inspection this last year. And also CIVMIC took a look at the senior center exterior doors. We do have 3 sets of exterior doors. They talked about the apparatus on those doors that allows the door to open and makes it handicapped accessible and the need for replacing those. Currently, there's a little paddle that's about knee height. So you have to reach down to open up the door. What happens on one of the sets of doors that faces the parking lot side is the apparatus that allows that to function is very outdated. So if a senior goes and hits that door multiple times, the door opener, it actually causes the door to lock shut for several minutes, which is a safety hazard. The bar that would allow people to get out should really be, chest height, where you would just push on it and be able to exit the building. A lot of these doors also are not very energy efficient. Sometimes in the wintertime, you can actually see through the outside through the hole in where the doors come together. So they could be obviously more energy efficient, and that would help save costs as well. We're very grateful the city has been doing a furnace replacement program at the senior center, and I believe that started about 3 years ago. We're getting ready to replace another furnace, I know this year. The beginning of the summer, we did have 2 air conditioning units that both went out almost at the same time and required some parts and replacements. That system is now about 23 years old, so it has been very slowly failing over the years. And there's also 10 furnaces in that building at a variety of different locations, from the roof to the basement to the crawl spaces of the building. And so, as I said, I know that Jim is going to be discussing those very important issues for us later tonight. And that's all I had for you.
Thank you, Tammy. Any questions for Tammy about the senior center budget request? Either in the room or Jeff on the phone? Jeff, if you ever have a question, raise your hand.
Yeah. My only question was, it seems like there's a lot of work and repair that needs to be done in that location. Is it feasible to do that work or even consider another location? Seems like the building's falling apart. Maybe I got the wrong understanding, but some of the things I mentioned, seems like the building is falling apart.
I would add, thank you for that, Alder Jackson. I had a similar question because I know it's about, I think it's $130,000 in repairs that are proposed. And I know there's a community campus plan, and we don't have to talk about it right now, but I'm wondering, could any of these repairs hold off until we make some progress on that?
Yeah, the short answer on that is it's a complicated question, as we know from past discussions. What we're trying to get for the council is information on, so we have a sense, these are old numbers, but we have a sense of what a new campus construction would look like, broad strokes, multi-millions, tens of millions of dollars. We also want to get for the council some sort of cost estimate range for what a substantial rehab of the 3 existing facilities are in site today, so that you have that information to make comparison and ask questions of before we get to the point of asking for referendum question. We're working with our architect consultants to scope out the work that would be needed to answer that second question. So that's kind of what we're struggling with right now. So I don't have a definitive timeline, and we'll have that ready for answers. So the question of, are these repairs needed? That would be a question for Jim and the individual department heads, but it's likely that we will be in these existing facilities for at least a couple more years. So it probably is money well spent at this point to keep the buildings operational.
Okay, thank you for that, Brian. Any other questions?
Thank you, Brian.
You can put your hand down, Alder Jackson. I do have questions about the furnace replacement, but I'll ask
Okay.
Jim. So
Okay,
thanks,
thank
Tammy.
you.
Bill, you're the MC, correct, for queuing up people?
Yep. So yeah, the next department is tourism, and that would be page 186 in the operating budget briefing book.
Whenever you're ready, Marlene.
All right. Well, I think we described what all of the differences are this year in the budget requests, whether or not we're increasing or decreasing different line items. But to just sort of give an overview, one of the biggest reasons for a pretty moderate increase to our overall budget is due to inflation, the cost of advertising, cost of conferences, et cetera. Also, next year is going to be an election year, so cost of advertising will go up. And we are also hoping that now that our renovation is complete within the depot, we have our conference space, we have our offices, and we've finally had everything repainted. Our next step is now to basically increase the draw of our visitor center. We want to make it more experiential. And we hope to do that using creating a video, having a TV screen in there, having the video playable on YouTube and our website, et cetera, about the city. It'll be actually a mix of history and new, since we're in a historic depot. And a lot of people come in asking us a lot of questions about the railroad, and hopefully this will answer those for them. And then it won't matter who's working the front desk that day as well. And so that's pretty much the overview. There's not a lot different this year.
Great. All right. Any questions for Mari?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't know if I heard someone speak. And so tourism, are all of your expenses paid out of room tax?
Yes.
Okay,
We are 100% funded by the lodging tax, including our salaries.
okay. Okay, so is there ever a situation where we would spend capital to increase a program like e-bikes or anything like that? Or would that
Not-
have to come out of your revenue as well?
Well, we do fund through our grant program certain tourism development,
Okay,
but transportation cannot be paid for by the lodging tax.
okay.
So e-bikes are a no.
May I ask how the trolley was funded?
The trolley was funded because, well, how it was explained to me, because this was started over 10 years ago, and it ran for 8 out of the last 9 years. The lodging tax, which is collected by hotels, paid for the trolley, and the trolley specifically went to all of the hotels and brought people to the downtown. So it was seen as a direct amenity to the hotels in hopes to drive business travel to Middleton, including like Epic, people who were staying long-term, and it wasn't successful. So.
Okay. Alder Wokus, did you have more questions?
What is happening with the trolley now? Is it owned by the city?
No, the trolley was leased
It's leased. That's what I
by
thought.
Visit Middleton from Badger Bus.
Okay,
And last June in 2022, the commission voted to not renew the trolley, so we haven't had it all year.
okay. I recall that.
And you're only the third person to notice that, just so you know.
Any further questions? for you?
Not right now.
Okay, Alder Jackson, your hand is raised, so I want to make sure we check in with you to see if you have a question or if maybe forgot. All right, so I'm going to pick up the B-cycle thread or shared mobility, I guess, shared bike system, because I do think that has enormous potential, especially if there are stations located near the hotels. And we have a station downtown or at other places within Middleton where we have restaurants so that people could, I used to be a business traveler, didn't have to travel to Middleton, but I would have loved to have had an option to get from my hotel that might not be easy to walk to a restaurant, hop on a bike and go, check in the bike, eat, and ride back. So I think that's something that really we should be pursuing.
I think that you're right. I think residents would really enjoy it and some visitors would as well. But the state statute is very clear that it's the money collected by this hotel tax pays for tourism marketing and tourism development. It cannot pay for public transportation. And e-bikes, the last 2 times that they were brought before our commission, the commission voted no. Large part, there was no data. We asked for them to bring us data for a community our size without a college in it. Show us that people outside of your city and your town are using, or your county are using the e-bikes. It's done with credit card. Nobody could ever give us any of that data. And so there was nothing to back up the claim that tourists would love it.
Mhm.
And we couldn't get it from Madison either. Although Madison's would be skewed because with the college, you're having college kids using their parents' credit cards that might be out of state, which is why we were asking about a community our size with the same number of trails so that it was also even, but without a college. And nobody has been able to give us that
Okay, well, that's a fair request, and I'm on the Ped Bike and Transit Committee, so I will bring that to them. I wonder if there's an opportunity for tourism and or the Tourism Commission to reach out to the hotels and gauge their interest in providing the stations themselves. And then we might be able to, within the city at least, fund a couple of stations, at commercial centers. So thank you, Alder Wilkes, for bringing this one up. I'm sympathetic about the event permitting going through the tourism. From what I understand, there does not appear to be any other option right now. Has the Tourism Commission discussed this situation and made a recommendation to bring to council?
So over the years, I've only been here for 4 years, but previous to that, I was told that it's almost an annual request that permitting be removed from tourism. And the reason that it stayed has been there isn't somebody at City Hall to take over that duty. The commission definitely believes it needs to be removed. Right now, because we're a city department, we are not sure how to navigate that. But again, according to the hotel tax statute, permitting is a city function for a municipality, so it should be paid for by city funding and not hotel funding. And so that is one of the things that has been a difficulty for us to ride on that line, because technically if tourism money is paying Laura Ports to do permitting for the city, then technically part of her salary should be made up by the city. And we know that that also is not a possibility because the budget wouldn't allow. And so one of the reasons why last year we were looking into software was, what is a way that we can try to come up with a way to work together on that so that so permitting isn't taking so much of her time away from her busiest season as well. And then the city actually came up with a solution that we're looking at. The current software had some widgets that we could add that is hopefully going to streamline that. And so Laura is going to spend this year just kind of watching how that works and seeing if it helps enough that maybe she's just the middle person passing it between and won't have to spend quite as much time. So hopefully that works. And if it doesn't, we'll revisit the idea of maybe coming up with a more robust software system. And 2 years ago, the commission was willing to pay for it. So we'll see what it costs in another year.
Okay, yeah, and I was going to say, it's one thing to include it as a significant concern or something that's noted in the budget document, but you see, we've got 400 pages of budget documents, and I think if something were to come to council for discussion, it would get a better airing than it will in the budget, if that makes sense.
Okay.
I had a question about the vehicle. I have page 182, but I think that is a different page numbering than you've got, Bill, because of the difference in files. What kind of vehicle are you thinking of getting in the coming year?
We haven't discussed purchasing a vehicle. We still have the Flex, and it only has like 60,000 miles maybe on it.
Oh, okay.
And so we haven't discussed replacing it right now.
All right. Well, somewhere I saw in one of the documents, maybe it's the 5-year vehicle replacement plan. And speaking of the of vehicles, and you say you have a Flex,
Mhm.
it looked like from a document that Bill sent me, it looks like tourism spent over $5,000 on fuel over the course of a year. Is that
I don't think that's correct.
okay?
I'll double check,
All right.
because we only budget for like 1,000 or 2,000 for fuel.
Yeah,
Flex?
it seemed like a big number. And I remember February had like a big charge, like over $2,000. So
Oh,
anyway,
that wouldn't have been us.
okay, well, we'll look into that. And then let me turn the page here. Finally, Mari, so I know you're going to do, or you're proposing to do a strategic plan.
Yes.
And is that next year? It's
Yes,
starting.
we had budgeted to do it this year, but there were a lot of different moving parts going on throughout the state. And we were waiting for that to kind of shake down before we decided how we wanted to move forward. So we didn't spend that money. We haven't touched it, and we're rebudgeting this year for that.
Okay. And I see Bill brought it up. It is a 2025 item. So I would just throw it out there. Please, please, please get an EV.
Yeah, if I could just briefly
Sure.
note, this is an excerpt from the vehicle replacement plan on the capital briefing book. Based on the life of the vehicle, it would be coming up in 2025, but there was a note from the mechanic and public work need to discuss with tourism about timing and options for the vehicle. So it's just on there because of the age of the vehicle without additional recommendations at this point.
Well, and if it's a 2025 replacement, I would not assume hybrid. I would definitely assume electric. And then finally, Mari, on just thinking of your strategic plan, I came from Sheboygan in 2017, lived there a long time. They do tourism differently. It's not part of the city government. And I'm just wondering, have you or the Tourism Commission ever talked about different models that may be advantageous for both tourism and the city? And if you haven't, would that be something that perhaps could be considered as part of the strategic plan?
So originally part of the strategic plan was looking at our organization as a whole, and part of that would include privatization, only because there were different things going on in the state. This is a much broader question. We are only about 1 of 5 in the state that operate as a department under the city that I know of. And so it comes up a lot. And I don't know the answer right now on whether or not it would be better for tourism and the city to split, because you would definitely be losing some of that synergy. But would you also be able to gain back some ability to do things like paid advertising or something? I'm not sure. So it was definitely one of the things that we were discussing as part of our strategic plan. And I'm kind of glad you brought it up, because I didn't want anyone to think we were defecting. It's just one of those things that you kind of have to look at for a business model. We've had a very good relationship with the city. And when I attend state board meetings, multiple times we were actually brought up as, okay, well, you're not supposed to be part of city government because you're not funded by, a city tax, right? You're separate. But Middleton does do it right. And so we have been brought up as like an example of how you can do it as part of a city department and not have a city overstep, which is the fear. Like when you talk to different destinations, the fear is a city oversteps onto the hotel tax. We have been very lucky. We've never had any, bad actors. We've never had a mayor or a city administrator who was trying to take control of that tax. So Middleton has been very lucky in that sense, doing things correctly, I should say.
All right. Any further questions for Mari about tourism? Not seeing any, hearing any.
No.
Thank you very much, Mari.
Thank you.
If I could make a brief comment as we transition here, I just want to let you know, you will find room tax 2 different places in the budget. By state law, 70% of room tax needs to be spent on tourism, and that is the portion that goes to funding the tourism department. The other 30% of hotel room taxes can be used for any public purpose, and that's the portion of room tax that's in the general fund. And next up is golf course. That's page 237 of the operating budget book. Page 70 of the capital. I will work on bringing that up. Jeremy?
Hi, Jeremy Sabalka from Pleasant View. Just go over kind of like the my budget just really briefly. I think the goals for the budget for next year, just as they always are, is to be a self-sustaining enterprise fund with the idea that we're paying $450K back in towards TIF, our advancement. And then we're also funding pilot so payment in lieu of taxes, which I'm proud to say this was the first year that we did that. We went from 96K this year, budgeting for I think 113 next year. So I'm happy that Pleasant View Golf Course is an asset to the city from a financial standpoint as well now. I think some key focuses that we're looking into in terms of golf is, we've done a lot of external projects onto the golf course, and in the future, we're looking at ways to refine our processes and procedures internally, become really good at what we already are good at. So I want to become better at some things such as condition. I want to be better For our staff, I want to try to get them to get 2 days off in a row. A lot of times our staff, I've got one staff member currently that's on their 14th day in a row working. And so those are some things that are opportunities and challenges for me for the future. What's been odd is we haven't had a normal year since 2019, I would say. And, obviously COVID last few years, but then we had a massive renovation project this year. Renovation is going to continue into next year with the construction. Finally, we'll have a normal year of 2025, but I would say that's the challenge, is to figure out what is going to be normal. What's the normal operating revenue coming in versus expenses? I think some big budget items are just figuring out infrastructure for the future, right? We've got a 3-year lease plan remaining, a 5-year lease plan on a lease for our carts, our fleet of carts. We've got 3 years remaining, and we're looking at what we want to do for 2027 and beyond in terms of our golf cart fleet. Do we want to switch that into an electric fleet? And if so, we need to figure out an infrastructure in place. We do have a couple challenges in terms of the golf operation at the clubhouse. A few of them actually. Number one would be storage or lack thereof. Number two would be no infrastructure for a fleet of 98 cars. Number three, we've got our range facility that is, I would argue, a little bit unsafe at the current moment for fellow golfers. And so we're looking at that and improving safety there. Let's see off the top of my head. And then finally, solar we're looking at, and then the outing pavilion and what do we do with that? And so these are all questions that we're trying to get answered. We've started the process this year and continuing that into next year. So.
Thank you. Any questions?
None here.
All right, I have just a couple. First of all, thank you for making the golf course an economic asset and other asset to the community. Much appreciated. And thank you for also considering all these sustainability related measures. And as you approach 2027 and are looking at options, by then, actually by the end of this year, the city should have an implementation guide for the sustainable purchasing policy. And I would just strongly encourage you to check that out and consider the life cycle costs of having electric golf carts instead of fossil fuel powered golf carts. The solar on the clubhouse, I know that was originally intended for this year, I think. Is that not going to happen this year?
It was originally intended for, I believe, last year or 2 years ago, and it never happened. And so now it's just kind of too late. We want to implement it with what we're going to potentially do with, if we need to build a new cart barn, what does that look like? Do we put solar there? If we expand the clubhouse for outings, do we put solar there? So right now, I think it's too early, unfortunately.
Okay. All right. But you're willing to have solar on these facilities?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. All right. Any further questions? All right. Hearing none. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
If I might just say, I believe this happened on a few other of the narratives that were submitted, but it still lists 2023
Mhm.
as the first year, just so anyone who's watching or anybody who might pull up a document that does refer to 2024.
I'm glad you noted that because I noted it too. And in my mind, I translated it all to be, well, that's the first year, but then I thought maybe it's not.
Yeah, there was a couple times when I was looking at the 5-year plan and I was trying to cross-reference stuff and but I think there's one on this narrative and then I think there was another one that I noticed when I was reviewing stuff.
Yeah, I apologize for those. We will go through and do a review and cleanup of all those dates.
Okay.
We do a lot in spreadsheets, so if things aren't updated in every place, that those can slip through, but we will try to have that clean when we have the final proposed budget book.
That's fine. Thanks.
And, next up, we have building inspection and facilities. And that would be in the operating budget book, starting with building inspection on page 85 and building and grounds on page 50.
Welcome, Jim.
Hello. We'll start with building inspection and get that out of the way before we go into facilities, which is probably we'll spend most of the time. Not a huge impact on the building inspection side of things for this upcoming year. I left our income the same. This year, we only had 4 brand new houses in the city, which is Very bad. Normally we have 45. We just don't have available sites right now. Lots available. We have 2 subdivisions coming. Hopefully we'll see some construction in them in this upcoming year, but I'm not counting on it right now. Commercial wise, there's a lot of developments on the books in planning. A couple of them have backed out. See how that rolls into next year. So I left our income on the permitting and plan review side the same as last year. I think we'll finish out pretty close to those numbers. It's going to be close. Community services wide on that side of it, but I have 3 budget projects in there. Community services is another one. Code enforcement it's not what it's called. For those that don't know, I have been short 2 major employees for the majority of the year, 8 months. One is facilities management or facilities. The other one was code enforcement. We both hired both of them positions in the last 3 weeks. So I'm now full staffed for right now. Knock on wood. Code enforcement and keeping him is going to be tough because he's only a 20-hour a week, no benefit job. But he's excited right now. So I'm happy for that. And we're training him. I'm working through right now. I have a vacancy coming up in December. We're losing our electrical inspector. So we've already started that recruitment process, and that's another project we're working on as well from that aspect, so we can keep that part of the department going. From a facility standpoint, where do we want to start? City Hall.
Bring up the capital, Jim.
Hmm?
You want me to bring up your capital?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Because I don't remember all the projects. There's a bunch of them between all the buildings. City Hall, we asked for a lower level remodel.
Scanning.
Oh, document scanning is the first one up there. Our paper files are very old and they become more degraded by the day. That's our history. That's all our permits from previous years. I downsized, I requested this last year. It didn't go through. I downsized the amount and tried to concentrate on more important files to get those scanned in. We talked with HR on a couple other ideas to help alleviate some of this and lessen the cost even more if possible. But we're still trying to get these documents scanned in so we don't lose the history. So that's where that one's at from a City Hall standpoint or downstairs building inspection standpoint. Next one on there was to senior center rewire. Tammy touched on that. They have some major electrical issues in the kitchen. It was designed as a waiting room for a bank, not a dining room kitchen. So the kitchen does all right. The dining room area, we have a lot of issues with electrical. So we're looking at adding 10 new circuits in there to handle the events that they run there. Another one for the senior center was the furnaces, and I know that's a hot topic. We've been slowly replacing the furnaces there every year. We're still on slate again. We're asking for a continuation of that. There's always a request to put electric air source heat pumps in there. It's not feasible. There's a lot of reasons why. Electric air source heat pumps in a commercial building are going to require supplemental heat in our climate, which means you have to run an electric air source heat pump and a gas furnace. So now I have to install 2 brand new units because they don't work together with the existing furnaces. Another problem that comes into play with that is I have to upgrade the entire electrical system in that building because it's 10 furnaces. It's not one like our house or like City Hall where we have 2. It's 10 individual furnaces over there. We switch it to all electric. The electric draw is going to be huge. I have to upgrade the entire electrical service to the building. Again, super expensive, not really feasible. The downside or the other side of it from the duty cycle standpoint, we will never see payoff on it because when the temperature hits 30 degrees, the gas furnace is going to fire up. Most of our heating season is below 30 degrees up here, unfortunately. So it's going to run the gas furnaces no matter what, and the electric air source part of it is going to sit stagnant. It's going to run for a month or 2 in September, October. It's going to run a month or 2, month and a half, maybe in March, beginning April. The rest of the year, it's going to run on gas. So it's really not a feasible replacement to go with electric air source heat pump in that building. Other options, other buildings, a possibility like maybe tourism, but not in the senior center.
I'll just add that the heat pump isn't just for heat, it's for air conditioning as well. So you have two units, I assume, a furnace and an air conditioning condenser.
Mhm.
So this would be similar. It would take the place of, that outdoor unit. I know some people implement a hybrid system where they have a highly efficient gas furnace, and then they've got the outside unit being the air source heat pump that again also pumps heat out of the building in summer for cooling and air conditioning. And then also there is the, but I don't know for sure if commercial units are the same as residential units, but they do operate lower than 30 degrees.
They do, but not as efficiently. The gas, I also teach energy efficiency for Slipstream in Madison. And we had a huge 6-hour class last year on air source heat pumps with, I can't remember the manufacturer. They're one of the big ones that are pushing a huge rebate. They're trying to push it in Wisconsin for this coming year. They can get down to, with a hybrid gas system, they can get down to 28 degrees. But again, the gas furnace in the wintertime, the gas furnace runs the majority of the time again, even with their system. So it's in our climate, it's more designed towards the residential aspect, the single family housing.
Mhm.
They do fairly well there. The commercial buildings, the senior center, there's no insulation in there. We can't insulate it. It's a block building. So the windows, the doors, part of the reason we want to do the doors is they're very energy efficient. So we can put an electric air source heat pump in there at 3 times the cost, because I have priced it out. It's 3 times the cost per unit. It's 10 units. It's never going to keep up. It's just efficient wise, it's not going to be there. We're never going to see a payback out of it. I don't think it's going to heat the building like we needed to in the winter for our seniors that are in there, and the warming centers. Cooling, it could possibly do it. But I think the bigger problem would be the heat end of it.
Okay, well, I would encourage you to, again, I'll remind everyone, there is a sustainable purchasing policy now that council approved, and the implementation guide should be done by the end of the year. So as future furnace replacements come up, I encourage you to look at the life cycle costs and really think about it. Well, as this building gets older, I hope it will be either replaced or the senior center will just move somewhere else to an existing building. But the more we all can do to make the shift to cleaner, renewable energy, the better we all will be, and our children and grandchildren, if we're lucky enough to have them. I did have a couple of other questions. One of the projects is rewriting, I think this is right. I've got on here, rewrite the minimum housing ordinance.
A goal, yes.
Yes, to make
It's been
them
a goal for
current.
3 years.
Okay. Does that involve a consultant, or is that something we can do in-house?
Something we can do in-house if I ever have time and a full staff.
Okay. And you mentioned how we are with staff now. So I noticed that the police department will no longer be funding a halftime position that they shared with building.
Never
inspector.
funded a halftime position. It's always been under building inspection. My employee does do some of their duties, yes, and we will continue to do that. If we can keep this particular person around for 3 weeks, we're going to get him trained on the police department duties.
Okay, well, the police department narrative indicates that they want to go in a different direction.
They're
recall.
trying, and
They're
if
trying,
hopefully
okay.
we can get that approved, then I can keep 20 hours in code enforcement.
I would definitely like to see that happen. And I wonder, is there any value, maybe not this year because it's not in the budget yet, but next year in making that a full-time position?
I would love to see it full-time. I could keep that person well busy more than 40 hours a week with our code enforcement in our city, and it's going to continue to get worse.
Madam Chair, I mean, if the net new construction number was not at 1.1%, yeah, that would have been something that was in the budget.
Because I know a lot of people who would like the lighting code in particular to be enforced. And
We
my
have a backlog right
constituents-
now of almost 100 cases because I have not had any employees in that position all year.
Okay, that's good to know. And that explains why the revenues are all permits and reviews and no, do you get
They're-
enforcement fees?
No,
Would you?
we
if-
have fines and tickets. They're only $15, and it takes about an hour to write the ticket. So when we're paying a staff like myself at my salary to write a $15 ticket in an hour, it doesn't. And I've been here 4 years and I just was authorized to write tickets a month ago. So it's a complicated process. We are working to simplify that with the courts. I've been working with the courts to simplify that. We've got it down a lot simpler. We had an issue with the police department. We always had to use the police department because it's an electronic ticket system. They cannot put us in that state ticket system because I'm not a police officer, which is why we had Mark in the past. When he worked for us, he was a retired police officer. He was able to do that. They can't put us and my new employee in there right now. So we worked out the paper tickets. We got that back in state just literally a month ago. So yeah, we can go out and write tickets. We prefer not to. We prefer to work with our constituents and our citizens and get them to conform. It takes a lot to get me to the ticket stage. There's a handful that I'm wanting to write out, but I try to work with the community to get them to compliance before we just start writing tickets.
Okay, good to know. And I would suggest to the administration that maybe it's time to look at the fees for the fines for
That's
things.
part of the minimum housing code rewrite, updated to a more current
Okay.
version of requirements in the state, and then also modify the fees to make it
To make it. make
stricter
the
but more
city whole.
beneficial and make it the same as everybody else.
Yeah, I don't see it as.
It's
a
going to seem really
punitive-
drastic when you see numbers because we are way behind on those numbers.
Yeah.
Most
I don't-
tickets start out at 300. We're at 15.
I don't see it as a punitive thing so much as just reimbursing the city for the time spent. So, okay. Any other questions for,
I did want
Oh,
to make one
yes.
comment I forgot to make real quick. We were talking about EVs.
yes.
I am on the slate to get 2 electric vehicles and get rid of my F-350 this year.
Yay, good for you.
Yeah, we're on a slate to get rid of the F-350. It's been parked since December. I think we've driven it a total of 5 miles this year. My facilities manager is currently driving it because that's the only vehicle he has to drive right now. The pickup truck is now code enforcement that we hired that position. We're looking at turning that back in and getting a electric car for that position and an electric half-ton van, fully electric for the facilities maintenance. So,
Thank you.
yep.
Much appreciated. All right, any other questions or comments? Hearing and seeing none. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Alder Jackson has his hand raised.
Oh, Alder Jackson has his hand raised. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, no problem. So I'm back to the same question when the senior citizen center rep spoke. It just, and I could be wrong, it just doesn't seem feasible to continue to pour money into the senior building instead of just looking for them a new location. Because Jim was speaking about electrical issues. It's not feasible to do this. This wouldn't work. That wouldn't work. So I'm just saying, is it feasible or is it safe economically to continue to keep pouring money into this building?
The repairs that we're asking for the next year, I think are all feasible. They're not super extensive repairs. It's a lot of money. I understand that. It's a very weird building. We all know that. It works? Is it ideal? No. I don't know where we would try to relocate to. I really don't. And then what would be the cost of relocating, whether we purchase, lease, rent, and then what would we have to do to modify that particular facility? I think would far outweigh the little bit to do the upkeep and repairs for the next year or two.
Okay, because my only concern was, I think I heard earlier, I think Brian or somebody mentioned long-term, the senior building being in it maybe 3-4 years. I just have a concern with that. Like just pouring, just throwing money into something that we may be in there for the next 3-4 years. And then what do we run in down the line? I know on several meetings we've had, there was, I think, a situation about a wall inside the building, just several things going on in that building that I'm just trying to, grasp. Are we really thinking this thing through as far as the senior building is concerned? And then also the safety of the seniors that are occupying or in that building with electrical issues with the conditions that we have in that building.
It's not that the electrical is dangerous. Nobody's in danger of being electrocuted. The circuits are not big enough to power when they plug in a crock pot for one of their dinners or things like that. It's just, it wasn't wired for that when it was a bank waiting room where you might have somebody plug in their phone to charge for 5 minutes while they're waiting. It's just, it's not that it's unsafe, it's just not, doesn't have enough service for what they need right now.
Okay, all right.
And I understand your question from a policy standpoint, and the council has asked that question in years past. And, I think staff would tend to agree, but until we have an answer on, whether or not the appetite of the council and the community as a whole via referendum is to, substantially rehab in place or build new at what would likely be a substantial cost, until we have that answer and locations for some of these things, I do think there is money that needs to be spent for cost of continuing of services if we want to continue to have a senior center for the next couple of years.
All right. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Next, we have information technology, and that's page 42 for the operating book. Initiatives on page 44.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Drew Montour. I'm the IT manager for the city. 2024 budget. It's nothing terribly exciting as far as from, new jazzy things or anything. A lot of our requested operating budget increases are due to software fees and licenses that we incur from our vendors. And those are basically a 5% increase across the board and everything. Two of our initiatives within the operating budget is a iWorks facilities management module. That's for the building folks for facilities management. They don't currently have a good solution in place to allow them to have staff reach out to them with building concerns, track building, elevator information, floor plans, et cetera. So they reached out to their vendor iWorks, and this was their proposal for it, to try to basically have a one-stop portal for all their information, just like they do with your, is Jim still here? What's your?
So from a permitting standpoint, we use iWorks, and it tracks all of our permits, all of our costs, all of our expenditures, which on the permit side, there's not a lot. With the facilities management portal, we can put in, if I've got to change the toilet paper dispenser at the library, it tracks how much we spent, how many man hours we spent on that particular project for that building. It will track each building over time. So we know we're spending X amount of dollars out at the senior center every year and X amount of hours they're doing repairs. Right now, we really have no good way to track any of that, where this program would allow that. So we know we have a better gauge on our buildings on what we're spending on maintenance.
Much more eloquent and succinct than I could have. Thanks, Jim. In addition to that, one of our other initiatives we're talking about is electronic signature system for the city. Basically, the ability to request self-signed documents. It supports SharePoint and also allows PDF or Word documents to be sent out for signature and routed around. Currently, the city staff has a very ponderous process and everything where they'll email somebody, hey, can you please sign this? They get it back, they send it to the next person, et cetera, et cetera. Incredibly inefficient. This would allow them to basically track and monitor anything that for contracts that need to go out for signature. So those are two initiatives within the operating budget. Within the capital budget, we have requested to upgrade and replace the City Hall network cabling and switch locations. This building was built into 1960s. In the 1960s, they did not decide to try to create the internet and have any network infrastructure in place. Regrettably, on the administrative side of the building and the public works side, we have switches that were located underneath desks and behind people's desk areas. They're totally unsecure. They don't follow security best practices. it's basically a hodgepodge. So we'd like to have a vendor come in, rewire the entire building on that side and certain areas on the Parks and Recreation side to better meet standards. Beyond that, we have some goals with the police department to replace their in-squad video system, upgrade the security and upgrade security at the municipal operations center, which would be phase 2 of that project, putting in video security systems. So both of those are listed under the police department's capital projects and the public works capital projects. Beyond that, one of our other initiatives is going to be trying to work with the library and doing an assessment of potential future merger with the city's information technology department. And I'll defer to Jocelyn if she wants to speak on that. But it's more the fact of currently the library has only one information technology staff member who basically does everything over there. So we'd like to just start the investigative process of, okay, what would it look like trying to combine our resources and better service the library folks as well. And that's all I have, unless someone has questions for me.
Great. Thanks, Drew. Does anybody have questions about IT?
How many people do you have working on IT right now?
We
Just
have
you?
a staff of 2.5,
2.5. Okay.
2 full-time, one 20 hours a week. We also have an agreement with Marco Technologies. They provide level 1 help desk assistance for us, and they also do a network monitoring service for us as well too.
So are they doing the security then with the network monitoring, or are they?
Yes, we have systems in place called Perch and CloudStrike, which basically monitor our network for intrusions, vulnerabilities, that in that aspect. If you're kind of like tilting that towards, okay, what are we doing with the capital project and everything? This is more of a physical security thing as opposed to, a network, a big bird watch and everything. So.
Okay.
I had a question about the iWorks system. Is that something, and maybe Jim can answer this too, is that something that we can use to track things like report a problem on our website when those come in? Or how are those tracked now?
So facility complaints for the last 4 years, 3.5 years, were text messages, phone messages, emails, catch me as I'm walking down the street to the next building. Hey, Jim, I need this, or hey, Dan, I need this fixed. That's how we handled it. I did have, a couple months ago, we created on the city website, on the I want to file a complaint tab, we created a facilities tab, and we gave it out to all the city staff members going, hey, if you have a problem with your building, please report it here. Then it all comes through email. Then I can track it better through that. So we have that in play. Our communications guy has tweaked that a little bit and put it on the intranet site. That's new to me. I know it, but I'm still learning that side of it. I'm still out in the web thing. So it's there, but iWorks would also do that. There is a portal that everybody can log in just like that, file the complaint. It'll go right to the building that we have already in there, and then it'll track all the issues for each building.
Okay, but what about resident complaints?
So resident complaints, I can speak to that as far as a report of concern on the city website. All of those can come in. They get immediately shunted out to the responsible department, and then they get email notifications. There's some metrics to track it and for them to be able to work through the city's web portal to go ahead and say, these are the actions I've taken and everything. So it's just not as robust as something like iWorks would be and everything, where, he can start doing analytical metrics as far as, how much are we spending on these buildings and everything. So from a citizen side and everything, we'd still want to defer them to using the city's website and the report of concern portal. This would be more internal for our city staff.
Okay.
And just to put a clarifying point on that too, one of the things that the new communications director is working on is streamlining those categories. Because right now, if you look on the website, there's, I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but some 30 odd things that a resident could click on. We're trying to streamline that to make it a little bit easier and have them as if it's a public works related item, you go to that and then there's a drop down menu that you can decide which, what your specific item is that you're seeing, just to make it more user friendly for people. But then on the back end of that system, we are able to kind of track the response to that.
Okay, and it's not just stored like in a spreadsheet somewhere
No.
manually.
No,
entered.
no,
That's
it's-
what I-
it's part of our web.
online portal that can run reports on it and everything.
Okay, and as Brent's doing that, I would encourage him to lower the barrier of making people log in. Madison doesn't do it, and if they can get away with it, I think we should try it too. Okay, any other questions? Oop, I don't see Alder Jackson anymore. Maybe he turned off his video.
IT is boring, so.
No,
He fell asleep. Yeah, there he is. Okay, thank you very much, Drew.
Thank you, everyone.
no, IT, y'all do a good job.
Thank you.
Okay, next department, we have water and sewer utility, and we have Mike Meyer connecting via Zoom. And I'll bring up the capital first, since I think that's where most of the items were for water and sewer. That is on page 197 of the capital budget book. And go ahead, Mike.
First of all, good evening, everybody. I am your new water and sewer utility manager. For those that I have not seen yet, I've been here for a little bit over a month now, trying to figure things out. The second week I was here, I was literally throwing this budget in my lap, so I've done the best I could with it. And if you have questions, I will answer them to the best of my abilities, but I'm still learning a lot. So right off the bat, we start with meter replacement. This is a DNR requirement as well as PSC. They set the totals of how many meters we need to change. As you can see, this number, 75,000, is unchanged and is going to basically remain the same for hopefully a while yet, as long as there isn't any price increases. Are you gonna scroll down, Bill, or are you?
Yeah, I've got the main replacement up.
Okay. Yep, I see that now. It went so fast. Water main replacement. We've had a number of water main breaks at the Dewey Court and Lake Street areas. Basically, over the last 10 years, there's probably bans right next to water main break bans. So we're looking to replace that. It's a high priority, as well as Franklin Avenue, which has been in the replacement category for quite a while. I believe working with the street replacement, we just do it when they're also doing the streets.
Then well rehab.
Well rehab, well number 5, this actually is not going to happen. This is our well rehabs happen biannually. This is actually a 2025 budget item, but it's up there to be slated on this year. 2023 well 4 is being rehabbed, and it should get finished up in the next month. Water utility vehicle replacement. This is a truck replacement per vehicle replacement program. This is a work truck with a work body, boxes that hold tools, heavy tools, as well as parts for fixing various things. Did you go to another one, Bill, or is that the same one?
Yeah, I think that was also related to vehicles and equipment. The next separate item was the tower inspection report.
Yeah, okay, and this is a DNR mandated thing as well, to rehab Tower 2. Tower 2 is the tower that is in the Pheasant Branch Conservancy area. We have a contractor. They'll provide the inspection, the paperwork, the tank cleaning, as well as any other sort of maintenance that they see in there, which they issues with paint, etc. But this is a 5-year DNR regulatory requirement.
And then the facilities condition review.
The condition review will be provided by our engineering outfit. And what they recommended is they will go through every well house, recommending proper maintenance, timed maintenance, basically ways to go about repairs, anticipated funding for those repairs in the future. And, you know, if we need to recommend other upgrades in the system, potential other emergencies, this is hopefully, you know, going to find them and let us know what we need to deal with before they become those emergencies and more expensive problems.
That was the final sewer, water item, and the sewer capital items begin on page 173, starting with the main replacements.
Sewer main replacement slash more along the lines of like fixing, repairing. Same areas, work in conjunction with the Dewey Court and the Lake Street areas. The water main is definitely more of an issue there, but we will definitely, as we're working on those in that same area and tearing up the same trenches established, we will be making repairs as needed.
Item 2 is the lift station SCADA.
The sewer lift station SCADA, your water wells are already on the SCADA system upgrade. And what this does is it brings the sewer line of lift stations right into that same upgrade that your wells are already in, and will work right alongside with each other. Basically, they're not maintaining the phone lines and some things as well as they used to, and so this has been recommended, I think, literally quite throughout almost every distribution system in our area. I personally don't know of, other than dialers, which is the low technology way to go. Everybody is jumping up to SCADA. This is just now bringing in our sewer to match our water upgrades.
And there was the sanitary facilities condition review.
The sanitary facilities condition review also mimics the water facilities condition review, letting us know, you know, how our motors, our longevity, there's cathodic protection because lift stations are underground. You know, they're facing rust issues, they're facing other things like that. It's basically just going to let us know longevity, what to prepare for, what to plan for, and try to eliminate those exponentially emergency costs, and keeping up with the unexpected maintenance issues.
And the Baskerville electrical panel upgrade.
The Baskerville panel upgrade, your lift station that is on Middleton Beach Road recently had this upgrade as well. MG&E, this is a recommend on the to upgrade the service. The 240 volt 3-phase, they're not, it's kind of like the phone line thing. They're not maintaining that for whatever reason. This would bring us into 208, which is more uniform with the MG&E, what they provide. This is also makes it all, other lift stations are all set at 208 as well. So it just streamlines everything. In an emergency, when we go to this and we have to hook up our generator, we have to dial in the generators to what this calls for. It has happened before that the voltage has not been set correctly because it's not uniformed. And there is a panel that fries out when you do that as a fail safe, but it does cost money when that happens. So this brings a uniformity to the system as well, creating further issues.
And And that was the last of the capital items. If I could just throw in a real brief note, our water and sewer utilities are funded from ratepayers. We are in a position where all of these capital projects are proposed to be funded with cash, and we've been cash funding utility capital projects. Both utilities have a strong cash balance. We periodically look at doing rate studies. We're a couple of years into the last rate adjustment for the water, which is regulated by the Public Service Commission. You can do those full rate cases every 5 years with the Public Service Commission. On the sewer side, we've done a sewer rate study, and it's also been our practice to annually, when we get updated charges from Madison Metropolitan Sewerage District that we pay to do our treatment, that we pass those on to customers. And that's typically done in December of each year, that there's action on those rates. So outside of that and some administrative charges back to the general fund, I don't believe there were any other requested line item adjustments. Mike, is there anything else that you wanted to touch on the operating side?
Not on the operating side. I know as a whole, the water utility has been dealt with a huge turnover. Over half of the utility is brand new crewmen. So you're not going to see a lot of big budget items from us. We are looking to maintain, get trained, get guys up to skill levels that we need to see them at before we start taking on some of that added above and beyond projects. So we just want to get things fixed that need to get fixed and keep this stuff. We don't want the emergencies. We want to get ahead of that sort of stuff. And that's what you're seeing.
Great. Thank you for that. Any questions for Mike?
I just have one question.
Go ahead.
In terms of looking at the future, what are we doing as far as hardening the systems from more or less technology attacks?
I can tell you, like, your SCADA upgrade, that is a safer way to go versus going through the dialer system, which is the old system. SCADA's got a lot more protections in place, firewall type stuff. Drew might even be able to elaborate a little better on that. But that is definitely an upgrade for that sort of stuff. Same thing with the electrical upgrade. It's more uniform thing. I can't say protective wise, but it's something that does help ensure a more normal, unusual circumstance, if you will, for guys that are coming out, on-call guys coming out of the field to deal with things. It's uniformed, it's streamlined. You're just less likely to create more issues on that.
Then do these systems use multi-factor authentication for the staff, to get in and that type of hardening, at least as far as entry point?
Definitely. There's actually, right now, there is only one system where you are allowed in, and you have to physically be at that. I'm not going to state where that is, but you have to be at that desk to get into that system right now.
So there's no remote access to it?
If there is remote access, and I don't want to say this, incorrectly, if there is remote access, it probably would come from Drew, or perhaps like the SCADA, I'd say you Semco or LW Allen, and they're the people that set the system up. That would be probably about the only way I can see that. I think, Drew, did you just stand up?
I did, Mike. To address that, we have that computer on an isolated network.
Okay.
It cannot be accessed even within our city environment. So yeah, we take great steps to try to make sure that our SCADA system is totally secure.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Anyone else have questions?
Thanks, Drew.
Jeff does not. I did have a couple of questions. So I'm looking at the operating budget, and Bill, I show it's page 215, but that may be different for you. It's the table showing water utility expenses. So the next one. Okay, so there's a 90,000, if you scroll down some more. No, maybe it's much different. There we go. Nope.
Do Do you know what section?
I'm
It's
seeing
within-
it in water capital expenses. So I guess I could have referred to the capital budget too. There it is. Okay, so there is a $90,000 request for transportation equipment. And I'm wondering if you can explain what that is. Is that the vehicle?
Yes, correct. And if that is in the wrong spot, that could, I mean, that could be, and that would fall on me with just lack of experience.
No, you're fine, because we have both capital and operating budget documents, and I just flagged this in the first time I read through, which was the operating budget. And you said that is a truck, correct?
That is correct. I believe like next year, and I believe I think I mentioned this to Robert, perhaps there's the availability of a replacement van type vehicle where we would be looking more of an approach on that type of vehicle to go the EV. I know there's a big push for that. So, but at this time for the truck with the large tools, ladder racks and whatnot that it carries, it would just stay a pickup truck.
So
Gas.
would a Ford F-150 Lightning be something you would consider? Would that be?
Unfortunately, for the load and the things that we carry in the water utility trucks, it requires that heavy of a truck, and I don't believe there is an EV option for that currently. What that F-350 chassis is, it's a 1-ton chassis. It carries a series of, it has 6 doors, if you will, with shelves for heavy hammers, water main bolts, hydrant parts. Hydrant parts are extremely heavy. We also have ladder racks that are coming off of it. In the beds, we incorporate, us throwing heavy water main pipes in there. So again, hydrants, motors, check valves, heavy ferrous steel parts, and that's why these trucks are 1-tons, because they're made to carry heavy loads as well as haul our trailer if we need to. The F-150 Lightning just isn't beefy enough at this time. If they keep coming up with bigger, larger driven trucks, then I can totally see that.
Okay, and then also looking at this page, the next item is a $58,056 expense. But it also says add 1 year. It looks like, at least in the copy of the capital budget that I have on page 201, it looks like this is still in the request. So just some clarification as to whether or not this $58,000 expense is to be included.
I believe that is next year, and I think that's the opportunity at the EV van, because that truck, it currently carries our water main break stuff in it, and it's not overloaded, but it's at capacity. So I guess it is in the 24, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it was originally in the capital narrative as a 2024, but in the recommended vehicle replacement plan that Brad had provided, it was shown as delayed to 2025. So we don't have it in the replacement plan as a 24 right now.
Okay, so that'll come out.
Yeah.
Okay, and then finally, Mike, on page operating budget, page 206, it's the major workload statistics, and it shows 2024 projected numbers. They all, for everything, the miles of sewer main, miles of water mains, they're all similar to 2023 projected, except for the number of water meters, which says 75. Is that supposed to be the number of new water mains that are anticipated?
That is the potential with the lots that are sitting right now, as well as the upcoming lots that will be available as part of ECF of High Road. They are working to tap water main and sewer here in the next week or so. And that's what that anticipation is for, is how many lots are also out there that will be available by the end of 2024. And that's just a guess.
Okay.
Relatively educated guess, but it is a guess.
Okay, but that should, Bill, then that should show like 6705.
I believe that's the intent. We can
Yeah.
update that.
And because you can see the 4 that Jim had mentioned earlier. Okay, all right. Any other questions? If not, thank you for joining us, Mike. Thanks for, welcome to your first budget cycle.
No, thank you. I appreciate all of you and if I can answer questions or anything, you know, obviously that's what I'm here for.
Okay, great, thanks.
Next area is water utility and water resources, and their budget initiatives are listed on page 228 of the operating book.
Go ahead.
What would you like to know? I just walked in from another meeting, so how would you like me to start?
Well, people have been giving us like a 30,000-foot view of what they want to do next year.
Sure.
What some of the challenges are.
Okay,
And I'm particularly interested in the concept of hiring a stormwater engineer.
okay. I'll start with the outline that Bill had provided of the department goals. Complete an assessment of the assets and determine both deferred maintenance needs and anticipated future maintenance practices and needs, which would be the mowing versus burning or things like that. Determine the maintenance cost differential between standard mowing practices versus maintaining native species. Complete a rate case study to determine the ERU rate for a potential referendum. As you know, we're going to expire the emergency one this next year. Consider a stormwater utility policy change that includes additional assets may be related to the rate case study. The ordinance and the initial referendum language allowed for more to be included, but the practice funding projects and routine maintenance tasks has been restricted. Significant challenges: lack of staff dedicated to the utility, transitioning water resources operating budget to the stormwater utility, which we just voted on recently, moving the operating from the water resources to SWAB, which we felt was logical. Developing a department with limited funds and time. So putting all of these things in place online, policies, procedures, we just are lacking staff to be able to get that accomplished. Top budget initiatives and capital items: complete rate study and a successful referendum. Complete design and construction of Spring Hill Pond and Middleton Hills Southeast Pond. Perform minor repairs and conduct deferred maintenance in critical locations. Hire consultant and begin design of Misty Valley, Hidden Oaks stormwater rehab projects. Continue updated flood mapping and resolve the Graber Pond outlet design.
So sound like good projects.
We anticipate being quite busy.
Great. Any questions? Alder Jackson, are you there? I
Yes,
have,
ma'am. No questions here.
okay, thank you. I have a couple questions.
Okay.
First of all, the flood mapping, I think this falls, or does that fall under water resources? Page 190.
That remained in water resources.
Okay, then we'll
But I
skip.
can talk about that. I don't believe Eric's going to join us. I can cover.
Oh, okay, great. So that shows $35,000 per year, but at some point it mentions like finishing that. So I'm wondering, is that an ongoing cost or is that like a big project that?
I think that's an ongoing cost that it keeps getting pushed out. And I think that as things redevelop, that might change. So we're constantly looking at if elevations change and if the flood mapping changes. If they happen to change the, storm regulations with how you calculate the inflow or what years you use for the storm events, that might affect those. I mean, I think that's 100-year map, but
Okay,
if that changes, we would need to do that.
okay. And then on page Well, again, I'm sorry, I was working off the original file, page 193 of the capital budget. There's a reference to a flood reduction project. And in the description, it says the planned Pond A2 project no longer appears to be an option. And I was just wondering if you could explain what that was.
We were looking to, out of the city, have a storage facility of stormwater. And we were working with the farm north and west of the airport. It was project A2. Steve Gatfield with EOR did this massive study of where it would most likely be the most effective to have some additional storm flood storage. And that was the selected spot, but we haven't had any success in negotiating with the landowner.
Okay. All right. Well, and you're aware, I hope that the city and the town of Springfield are trying to work together on some upstream stormwater projects.
Yep, I'm aware of that.
Okay, good. Because maybe that could take the place of the Pond A2.
Absolutely look into it.
Also, let's talk about the stormwater engineer position, because I understand it was in the budget, the two positions, an engineer and also, I guess, administrative staff were in the budget, but now maybe that's going to be pulled back because we won't have the referendum until November. My question is, and I understand that because we don't want to take on two new staff and then have to convince the voters to continue to fund those positions. But my understanding is even if we have to revert to the original, very extremely too low, $15 per equivalent runoff unit for the stormwater utility, that should raise enough revenue to pay for a stormwater engineer. So I'm wondering if the Stormwater Utility Board and or Water Resources Management Commission have been talking about continuing to pursue the stormwater engineer position, because that one is identified in our strategic plan.
Just tonight, and I came from the SWAB meeting to get here, they decided to rescind the original request to have a referendum in November. Waiting for the rate case study to figure that out. The request was for a stormwater engineer and a utility or a stormwater crewman. So we don't feel that the positions are sustainable with the $15 ERU and be able to perform projects and construction and repairs. So there's a sliding scale to it. We could do it for a few years, but as we go on, it's unsustainable to have those two extra people without the referendum. During the meeting, they also determined that they would wait till the rate case study and possibly not even do it in November of 24, but push it to April of 25, the referendum, where there are more, I have to be careful how I phrase that, people that are more interested in the stormwater than just the presidential election.
I don't agree with that approach. And
What is the sunset on the current?
we have until the end of 2024.
End of 2024.
End of
Yep.
2024, correct. And that isn't a final decision yet. And maybe the rate case study gets us in a better position to have a better answer to provide a more appropriate ERU for the next referendum.
Yep. Well, but the problem with doing it in April of 2025 is that we would then revert to the original $15 per ERU, and that's just not, I just don't see that happening. I think November is our best target.
That's also a risk we discussed.
Yep. Okay, any other questions? Richard? I think that's all. I'm sure I'll think of something, but
Send me
I
an
have,
email.
I was gonna say, I can always email you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, our next department on the list is Public Works Department. We're doing fairly well on time. We're about a little more than 10 minutes behind, about 12 minutes behind at this point, according to the schedule. Public Works is on page 108 of the operating book with their initiatives starting on page 113.
Sure. And kind of like Rich had prepared some comments along Bill's directives, I did too. And sort of what we isolated is Major goals are to maintain service levels as well as possible within the constraints of our staff time and budget. That's kind of our baseline expectation, and yet some years we struggle with that. 2, begin looking into succession planning with the potential to reorganize the department. That's something that actually was on our list last year and we couldn't get to it. And it's our hope to get into that this year. And 3, work on developing a street sign and pavement marking policy manual to help guide systematic installations and removals to best use our available funding to maintain required retroreflectivity of signs and help reduce visual clutter. There's always an impression that more signs is better, but at some point it's just not. So those are our major goals. The challenges, of course, are that with limited staff time in our engineering crew, streets crew, and mechanics work group, it just hasn't allowed us to take on everything we've intended in the past several years. In particular, among the engineering group, the reintroduction of major developer projects has taken significant time. So we were sort of keeping up with our city projects, or at least most of our city funded projects, while development was really slow. But this past year kind of inverted our available staff time. So a lot of it was dedicated to developments, not just major subdivisions, but even smaller site developments that just took multiple reviews and an awful lot of staff time. As Rich already talked about, trying to maintain stormwater facilities without dedicated staff has a draw from our streets crew to some degree, but in as big a part, I would say the lack of availability of LTEs to help out seasonally, especially in summer, has been a pretty significant drain on what our streets crew can accomplish in the course of a year as well. Because as we put our full-time people to some of the tasks that had been taken on by LTEs, there's just less time to take care of other stuff that we expect of them. And I would say the growth of the fleet and complexity of vehicle systems in particular really has stretched our mechanics to their ability to keep our fleet safely moving and operational at all the time. They've got a lot of equipment setup stuff, but they've also got new diagnostic stuff constantly to be learned. So that's its own limitation. Beyond that, we've all seen fluctuating prices and flat out availability issues. So just trying to buy something takes staff time, but it also takes more money than it used to. And EV technologies and capabilities are continuing to evolve, which is a very good thing, but supply and demand of vehicles has also then been fluctuating, which has been a really tough thing. So our transition to an electrified fleet, while we're making steps, has been a lot slower than we were hopeful of, and especially in mid and heavy range vehicles, that's been slow. And then vehicle replacement costs have been outpacing our estimates. So the new technology, the new emissions requirements that come along all add to increased vehicle replacement costs. And we expect that to continue with even more significant effects as we're going into the future. For high-level initiatives, because I know DPW has an awful lot of numbers in the budget books, but at a very high level, I would say most of the what's called budget initiatives, the decision items, are largely to meet either mandatory requirements or to maintain service levels, apart from requests for 2 new staff positions, one which would be a mechanic technician and the other a staff engineer. Really notable, and I would say more discretionary operating budget decision items are the downtown snow removal. We've requested in the past several years to try to bring that $25,000 from the CDA over to the operating budget, and we haven't been able to swing it, but it's back on the list. And there's an initiative for a recycling center to have some additional staffed hours, which would nearly double that from 572 hours currently budgeted up to 1,040 hours. Another major initiative is that we're going to try to keep up with about a dozen street projects next year with our staff. And that includes Pleasant View Road, Parmenter Street north of Century Avenue, which is a pretty significant reconstruction. And then the Lake Street and Dewey Court reconstruction project, which also is going to be pretty significant, as well as keeping on top of developer infrastructure of public improvements in 2 subdivisions. I'll add traffic signal upgrades have been really slow due to equipment availability, but they remain a very high need. And last, I will highlight on the capital side, under our category of other, number 14, which is about an elimination of a city retaining wall, has an agreement that the council entered into in 2023, but no funding was identified at the time. So it's a lower priority in 2024, in part, I think, because it could be funded with 2023 excess capital budget funds. But that's a commitment. So with that, I'll end.
Great. Thank you, Sean. Any questions about Public Works?
None here.
Alder Wilkes.
Not at the moment.
Okay, I have a few. On page, I'm looking at the operating budget. It's page 112 in my packet. And it is the maintain service levels to budget decision item detail. Street lighting energy increasing by $30,000. Can you explain that?
Yeah, we've been budgeting from sort of looking backwards 3 and 4 year rolling averages. And we've been at, I think, a level of about $100,000 for MG&E to power our street lighting. Our recent annual cost has been about $130,000, and I don't see that going back down. So we're just, for now, planning to suck it up, but that's a pretty big hit.
Okay. And then also still on the same page in the operating budget, it mentions in the justification, without summer LTE help, streets crews not expected to have available time to take on a storm drainage rehabilitation project next year. Is that any project or a specific one?
Well, we had our eye, I think, we had our eye next on taking care of the rest of the Algonquin drainage area, but it's any project of that scale, right? So we had been down in Stonefield, we had been up in the Middleton Hills area, but that's just more than we can take on now with what we've got.
Okay. Moving on to some other things, I think it's great to shift the stormwater budget items to the new operating budget for stormwater. Great idea to add an EV mechanic and technician and training. And I do understand the need for more engineering staff. I'm aware of how difficult it was to get through. Well, I think this is just an unusually just crowded calendar for everybody in the city with the 2 developments somehow winding up on the same schedule. And then in planning also the zoning code rewrite and comprehensive plan. I wonder if there's also, in addition to potentially hiring more staff, if there's also a need to start charging more from developers for all the work. I noted that the narrative indicated reviews going on at the same time that revised plans were coming in, even though, the initial review is still taking place. And then maybe also some procedural changes so that type of overlapping or leapfrogging doesn't happen. So I just mentioned that.
Yeah, and I don't know that it's leapfrogging so much, but there's been a lot of overlap just based on volume, right? So historically, when a set of drawings came in, it was maybe 2 or 3 iterations from approved. That number has jumped to more like 7 or 8. So it's a significant increase in workload. And it's not that we're holding anybody to a higher standard than we ever did. We're just not holding anybody to a lower standard than we ever did. And for whatever unknown reason to me, it's just taking a lot longer.
Also, I like that you're trying again to move the downtown snow plow costs into the public works budget. I support that. Looking at the capital budget on page 30, I guess, in my document, it's TID 3. So are the $5 million and the $4.6 million for Pleasant View Road and Parmenter respectively, is that in addition to the allocations in 2023?
Those are my best guess, as if those figures, right, the allocations in 2023 budget lapse and do not carry forward, that this would be effectively 2024 money, ignoring what was in the 2023 budget. So not additive, if that's
Okay.
if that's
Okay.
clear.
And then if we could look at page 26, sorry, Bill, it's the budgeted vehicle replacements. Let me find my page and then I can tell you which one it is. 26. Okay, so it shows in the table. Yep, that's it. What's the $360 or $360,400 subtraction for 2021, 2022 budgeted replacements? Is that resale value? What is that?
No, the either sales or trade-in would be in the line anticipated trade-in or sales,
yeah,
and that's
there's that.
showing money coming back into the plan. What this is doing in the yellow box is looking at the available funds within the vehicle replacement plan. We're projecting to start with 734,000. What that 360,400 represents is, of that 734,000, 360,000 of that is for vehicles that were approved in 2023 or prior budgets, but have not been paid for yet, primarily to delays in ordering and receiving vehicles.
Okay.
So while that is available cash, we're subtracting it as available for future purchases because that's for items that we are still waiting to receive.
Okay. And then thanks, Bill, for that explanation. Moving on to the next page. I appreciate that you acknowledge that the transition of the fleet is taking longer than we would have hoped. I had hoped to see more EVs proposed both this year and in future years. I think it would be beneficial if in future tables, instead of saying no EV option available, it would say no EV available yet, or probably more accurately for our vehicles, at least no Ford EV available. And I'm wondering, why has council ever approved an agreement to use just Ford as our vendor?
I don't think that was a council decision. No, not that I can recall anyway.
Okay.
I think that was trying to standardize the number of materials, stock parts that our mechanics were trying to store and track.
Right. Well, with the transition to EVs, I think it would behoove the city to expand our vendor list because the parts will be different. The parts will be fewer for EVs. And there's really no reason to only stick with Ford. And then finally, I'll just mention, I was also disappointed not to see life cycle cost analyses performed. We talked about this at a public works meeting with the sustainable purchasing policy in place. At the very least, I would have hoped that staff would have tried to do the life cycle cost analysis that is required in that policy, even though the implementation plan is not available yet. So I hope we'll see that certainly.
I think Brad actually did that. I don't know that it was in the budget documents, but I do think that's available.
Okay, I would appreciate receiving that if possible. And I would include that in the budget document because that's really helpful to have. And, just to underscore the need for making the switch, in 2020, we spent $131,000 on fuel. In 2023, we're projected to spend $245,000. That's an 86% increase, which not surprisingly tracks with the price of fuel going up. So we really need to start thinking outside the box. Okay, anything else for Sean? If not, thank you, Sean.
All right.
Okay, and next up, we have the Middleton Fire District. That budget is included starting on page 101 of the operating budget book. that starts with just the short line items for the city's contract and then the fire district's budgets on page 102.
So I'll start with the 2024 overview of the budget. The operating budget that's before you shows a request of adjustments to full-time staff wage and benefit adjustments to come in alignment with the Fire Commission's directive. Known increases in health insurance, supplies and materials, building materials, equipment maintenance, insurance, and utilities. It also shows an increase of offsetting income of $17,500, which is the city share portion of our 2% dues income from the state of Wisconsin, with showing a net increase request for all line categories of $46,134. The significant challenges or issues in 2024, we will see the retirement of a 32-year veteran, battalion chief, and community education specialist of the MIFT. Onboarding a new person, training them in the upcoming months will be very important. All the while continuing to implement a new management software, which that individual is a key part of, that helps with the efficiency of our management of our organization and the 2,800 inspectable properties that we manage to carry out. 2024 goals. We are going to be hoping to conduct a study for future building needs and placement of the Station 3 building at on the northeast side of the corner of Highway Q and Century Avenue, whether it's located there or elsewhere. We are going to be conducting a study to better put a need for time and placement. Also finalize facilities changeover to energy efficient LED lighting, which will complete a 3-year process that we've been doing within budget of funds on hand, and look to implement solar infrastructure at both Station 1 and Station 2, and more energy efficient HVAC pump systems for both Stations 1 and 2. As always, we want to remain proactive versus reactive through our fire and hazard reduction and prevention programs, and to remain professionally staffed by volunteers by onboarding our new recruit class of volunteer firefighters that we've been holding off for several years due to the pandemic. But we are going to be acting on the applications that we have on hand to bring those individuals on board. But from our operating perspective, that's what I have to present.
Great, thank you. Any questions? Alder Jackson, are you there? I had one question, and it's
Sure.
Page 99 of the operating budget, Bill, which
Yeah, it's probably an updated page number now. Which item are you looking at?
budget detail, page 3.
Okay.
Okay, so I noted that overall wages are proposed to go up 11%. And looking at the part-time wages and the quarterly stipends, those barely went up, but leadership salaries are proposed to go up 13%. And I'm wondering if you can help me
I
understand that.
can somewhat help you with that. That was by the Fire Commission's directive over the last several years. They've been trying to bring the full-time staff's wages in line. The fact that there is the stipend amounts that generally goes up by the requested cost of living adjustment to make room for any additional volunteers and the stipends that they do receive. But the discrepancy there is full-time staff versus volunteer stipend amounts.
Okay. Any further questions from members? I want to thank you for noting the LED lighting and the solar, and I hope possible heat pumps. That's really terrific to hear that you're taking those things on. So thank you.
And I think it reflects it in our budget by not having to go up so much in utility costs, because we are seeing a savings in those numbers. We just are finding more and better ways to implement it as we go.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
You want to talk capital?
Yeah, we can bring that up. That is page 29 is the fire district capital replacement plan. There's no major purchases you'll see in 2024, but since the beginning of our capital replacement fund, we have been looking forward to see where we'll stand. We did update the numbers to the best of our ability. This is a working document that we even multiple times during the year look to see what prices are on various vehicles. Last year, it would be noted the biggest difference between last year and this year is the time in which we run into a deficit. We were at year 2033 before, and we are now running into a deficit in 2032. Just the cost of vehicles of this magnitude go up. We have looked, and another big difference you'll see is the elimination of vehicles that we've taken out of our fleet of an engine, a tender, a brush truck, with the implementation of rapid response vehicles. So in 2024, you'll see the vehicles that are being built out today as we speak will be going online and be capable of responding 24/7 year round, where in the past they haven't been able to do that due to not being able to heat the water compartments. So I know there's discussion, and I think the city has put aside additional funds or a little bit more annually in preparation for that 2032 timeframe. And to be specific for any viewers out there, this is the numbers up top are district shares that we are talking this, then it gets broken down into the city of Middleton's share of that, which has actually dropped slightly into 60, about a percentage point from last year to this year. So this is district share. Yep. Yeah, the district share. And I just wanted to touch on, so this is looking district wide. What are these projected replacement costs? The city share historically had been about $190,000, and the city was putting and has been putting that money aside as assigned fund balance in the general fund. So trying to cash fund these annually in anticipation of years where there would be larger capital purchases. And a couple of years ago, seeing the trend and that there would be a point where there was a projected deficit, the city started increasing its allocation by about 3% per year. So for 2024, I believe it's about 206,000 rather than 190,000 that we're projected to put aside. We have about 1.2 million in that fund. So there may need to be further increases depending on what continues to happen with the cost of vehicles, but we're trying to build that up a little bit each year in anticipation of those higher costs.
So you're saying that fund is going up 3% per year, or it's gone up 3% from before?
The city has increased its annual amount by 3% each year for the last few years. So to go from 190 to 200 and now at 206.
Okay, so each year is going up 3%.
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks for that explanation, Bill. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, we're in the home stretch with a few departments left. Next up is the police department, starting on page 54 of the operating book.
Did you say 54?
54, yes.
Thank you.
And narratives, or excuse me, the initiatives starting on 63.
Good evening. You'll see the major cost increases for the police department are again related to personnel. At my personnel request are related to the 2018 staffing study that we completed. We should be up 3 police officers based on that staffing study. I'm very appreciative of the city supporting the referendum last year and adding 2 more police officers but we are still far behind where we need to be based on that staffing study. Additionally, the nationwide average number of officers per 1,000 is 2.4. We're currently at 1.74 with the 2 additional officers that we added. I think for a city our size, 2.4 might be high, but I still think 2 is a number that we should be looking for. So I put another request in for 2 more police officers. We're even with those 2 positions, we'd still be behind 1 based on that staffing study. Additionally, I've asked for a full-time dispatcher the last couple of years. The staffing study called for 2 by the end of 2023. We have not added any dispatchers since that staffing study was completed in 2018. We plan on doing another staffing study in 2024. These are not numbers that the police department, we don't come up with these numbers for staffing. This is an outside firm that analyzes our departments, the expectations of the city, the service that we provide, and they provide us with those numbers. And again, the staffing requests are based on that, the police officers and the dispatcher. You also see that I've asked for 2 community service officers part-time. So since early 2000, the Mark Walther position, we have shared with the building inspection departments. That position's getting busier and they seem to be devoting more time to building inspection, but that means other services that position did for the police departments are no longer being really handled on a regular basis. That means parking downtown, parking around the high school, fingerprinting, all those things that our officers don't have time to do are not being completed now, especially around the high school, as we now have the biggest high school in the States. As Kendra heard yesterday, we have a lot of students driving to our school and it's in a residential neighborhood. So that creates a lot of issues for the residents and parking issues that the police department is trying to deal with. So we're asking for 2 part-time community service officers to handle some of those issues that we're not getting to as the city grows. That's also a great recruiting tool, as a lot of those positions in other communities are filled by students at Madison College or in college looking for part-time work, or retirees just looking for 20 hours a week and taking on some of those additional duties that, again, the police department can't handle. The annual DaneCom maintenance fee, that's mandatory, the $9,542. I'll give you a quick explanation. 2016, when DaneCom came on board, that's the whole radio system throughout Dane County that all public safety uses. Fitchburg requested to have 2 towers in their city that they actually built by their city funds. They were maintaining it, service, all the repairs they were doing. But in 2023, they went to the DaneCom board and asked for the DaneCom board to take over their towers because of the cost, and they just couldn't keep up with the maintenance. So based on that request, DaneCom board taking over those 2 towers, every municipality in Dane County had an increase. Ours was $9,542, and that will continue to go up in the coming years. I think those are kind of the highlights. We can go to the capital bill if you like.
Yep, and capital is on page 119.
There's 3 major projects in 2014 that I'm requesting funding for. The first is the UPS replacement project. This is original to our building 13 years ago. Based on maintenance that we've been doing on this for the last couple of years, they've been telling us that it's time to replace this unit. This is critical to our network, all of our major computer components in the police department and our communications center. It's separate from the generator that I know Kelly's been working on, the battery project. So this is critical if we have a power failure, that our operations in the communication centers can continue to function, and we can dispatch calls, or we can receive 911 calls and continue to operate with the most critical functions in the police department. The next one is the replacement of our squad car video system. In 2016, we replaced these. The manufacturer's recommending every 8 to 10 years that we replace these in-car recording systems. This is in addition to the body-worn cameras that our officers wear that we replaced this year. This is now the in-car radios or in-car video system that captures everything outside of the car, traffic stops, violations that we use in courts. We use it for if there's complaints against officers, we can look at this video in the squads, but they're saying that they need to be replaced, and that would be $70,000 to replace all of those. And the last one is kind of a police department function because it's in our building, but it's more of an EOC issue. So when we opened our building in 2011, 2010, We found out after we had 3 incidents where we opened the EOC that fire and EMS struggled to communicate from our EOC to the field units. And in one particular incident, the EMS folks had to actually leave the EOC, and they were not part of our EOC command because they cannot communicate with field operations. We've worked with General Communications to take a look at this problem. They think they can fix it, but it's an upgrade to our EOC, the tower, the radio equipment, and that comes with an expense of $45,000. But it would eliminate the issues that we're currently having. For when we have a major issue in the city, we open our EOC. Fire and EMS would be able to stay in the EOC with the police department to be able to communicate to the field units and address an emergency situation. So it's pretty critical. Again, it's not a police department, even though it's in our facility, but it is an EOC and city critical feature that we need to get upgraded. That's it. Yeah.
Okay,
Unless you have questions about those.
sure.
I
Go ahead.
I have a question about the UPS. Did you requested this last year as well? correct?
I requested, but for this year,
Oh, okay. So it was in the, okay,
it was in the 2024.
2024
projection,
from the, okay, thank you.
yeah. And it was actually $100,000. Working with the company that has kind of given us a quote, they said what was put in our building 13 years ago was a much bigger unit than what we need. So we backed down to a much smaller unit that we think will be adequate for our needs at the police department.
Great. And the microgrid will be redundant backup?
It will not. That is for our big generator to operate the building,
Oh,
to operate the EOC. So the UPS is just really specific for our networks, our computers, our dispatch center, 911 calls. The big generator is for our building, making sure bathrooms work. When we open the EOC has electricity, has computers, has TVs that work. So that is more for the entire building. The UPS is specific for our networks, our computers, for our dispatch center.
Okay. Regarding the new officer positions, so you did get the 2 this past year because of the referendum, and we had to add a vehicle to the fleet because of that. Is there, I didn't see, maybe I missed it, a fleet addition?
I don't think we need an additional vehicle. If we add 2 more officers, I think we're fine. We were at that point last year that if we added more, that we needed another vehicle, but I think we'd be fine if we added 2 more.
Okay. And I know there's been a lot of turnover, officers leaving for more lucrative positions elsewhere. Where do we stand with regard to unfilled position officers specifically?
Yeah, great question. Yes, it's a trend throughout the country. I just read yesterday that I think it was LA is at the lowest number of officers they've seen in 40 years. New Orleans is the same. Law enforcement saw retirements up 45% in 2021, not shocking with everything that happened in 2020, and recruitment is down 50% since that time. We struggled. We did a certified only recruitment that I asked to have some signing bonuses. That was not successful. We've now opened it up for a regular recruitment. So we'd send somebody through the academy. That has been more successful. We're currently conducting 5 backgrounds on candidates that have gone through an interview, and we think they're viable candidates to move forward. But still a long process. The background, they got to do a psychological exam, they got to do a physical exam. But we're getting there. But we're not the only department that is going through this where they're down officers and kind of digging out of a hole. But I'm more hopeful now than I was 6 months ago.
Okay, great. Any further questions? Alder Jackson?
I don't have any questions. I just want to make a comment to the city, to the mayor, to the council, that you guys know my passion is public safety. And I think we need to do whatever we can to support our Middleton Police Department, who does a great job, and get them the office they need with the state of America and where we're going. Safety and security in our community is one of my biggest passions. Chief mentioned the largest high school. We also have the largest middle school in the state of Wisconsin. So children, women, our youth, I think we need to make this a priority to make sure that we're securing our borders in the city of Middleton, which is a beautiful and a safe place to live. And it's safe because of our Middleton police officers.
Thank you, Alder Jackson.
Thank you. Any further questions? All right, thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Next up is EMS, starting on page 76 of the operating book. And if we're looking at initiatives, really it's just one large initiative on page 81 for the operating budget.
Good evening. So as in years past, I always take this opportunity to kind of do a little kind of top view down and how our operations are slightly different than a lot of other city departments in that, you know, fully well, when you consider the revenue sources that we bring in through our fee for service revenues, as well as our cost sharing arrangements with other municipalities and some other recent programs that have offered up some fundings in support of EMS through the state of Wisconsin. 2/3 of our entire operational costs are met by those revenues. So, you know, I'm pleased to say that we can deliver that service without, you know, necessarily relying, you know, heavily upon the taxpayers. But that portion that the taxpayers do fund is what I consider to be our insurance policy. And that is to make sure that the service is available. And overall, our entire, you know, program is really so focused around maintaining that essential public safety service that we deliver in an environment that has been historically now continually increasing in call volumes year after year after year. Just in 3 years alone, we have added nearly 500 calls to our annual call volume. And it's a trend not unique to us. It is what we were seeing across the board in EMS systems just about everywhere. So when we're looking at the summary, you know, as far as the document we had up before, if you want to talk about revenues first, you know, we talked about the two main sources are from the billing revenue. And based on right now, we always have to do this kind of I would say week by week adjustment as we get into the budget cycle, because we make our projections based on what we've seen so far in the year. But we know that until we get closer to the end of the year, those are always subject to change and refinement. So through the process, we will keep you updated. So right now, the billing revenue, we're just simply going on the portion of our call activity. But there was a component that was new even in the 2023 budget. That's been a rather long, drawn out affair with the state of Wisconsin. I mentioned about some of their additional funding through what's called the Wisconsin GEMT program, which essentially the Medicaid program has historically had a pitiful reimbursement. You know, we're talking about 10 cents on the dollar versus what other entities do. They are now going to bring that up closer to what the Medicare rates are. So we were expecting to get quarterly payments in 2023 for that, but they have now said that they're going to issue a single payment near the end of this year. So none of those revenues have been incorporated into these projections, but we're you know, very certain they will be there. We just don't know exactly what the number is yet for right now. Of course, the service contract sharing is what we do with our townships, as I mentioned before. That again is a fluid number because it's based on our projected not only expenses, but revenues, and then how we on a per capita basis split that out. So it's somewhat of a placeholder right now. As far as the expenditure side out there, most of the things we hear are really, again, maintaining those services we have out there. Like everything else, our costs for medical supplies, pharmaceuticals have gone up. We've added some actual treatment modalities in our operations in this year that will, you know, affect some increases in some of the supply expenses that we have to lay out for that. And then, of course, uniforms, we have some protective equipment that's expiring, that's reached its point where it needs to be, you know, replaced. Outside services, that's the billing company that we pay their fees. Again, this is somewhat of a placeholder number right now because that will fluctuate based on our final revenue projections. But right now it's the number there. Vehicle equipment maintenance, the main thing that's happening there is the vehicles in our fleet have not reached, they're now beyond their 3-year, 36 factory warranty. So now we will begin to see some additional expenses for repairs in that are no longer, you know, covered under the standard warranty. Motor fuel and lube, you all know that whole deal out there. Not only is that related to our increase in call volume, but of course the cost of the fuel itself. But our fleet is what it is right now. We don't have, any, we're not anywhere near the fleet replacement of our ambulances right now. So that's pretty much a fixed item out there. And then utilities, and that's a broad category. If you kind of drill down into the commentary I have, it covers not just, gas, electric, water, but it's everything from our phone system to our internet to you name it, everything that's pretty much related to, technology and utilities. So between the two right here, it actually shows that, we would come away with a better standing than where we are right now. But overall, that's kind of the summary of on the expense side of things. We can talk about, you had the other document up there, Bill.
Capital, page 64.
Okay, so AED replacements. This has been something that's been carried from year to year in previous 5-year projections. We have now reached the point where we really now have to act upon this. So it give you the high level thing out there. EMS, on behalf of many city facilities and department, we manage all of the automated external defibrillators. We kind of inherited that. We're of course probably the best ones to be able to maintain and all those. But over the years, that number, I think we started off way back in 2002, I think is when we, or 2001, when we got the first ones. The initial acquisition was 9 of them. We're up to 28 that we manage across the city. They've been acquired at different points in time. And we're fortunate that we've got some AEDs that are over 20 years old, which shocks a lot of people. But the brand that we use happened to be software upgradable through the years. So we could really extend the life of them. But you can probably appreciate this. The initial units out there were built on software that ran on Windows 98. So we have gotten to the point right now where Zoll, the manufacturer, the current models that we have are no longer able to be upgraded with Windows 10 or Windows 11. So we have to now start getting those replaced. So we took the entire fleet, kind of split it into 2 initiatives. We'd like to do half in 2024 and then the next half, which are slightly newer, devices in the following year out there. And primarily most of those would go to the police department because they have pretty much the oldest ones that are, in the entire fleet out there. So that's a $30,000 investment for that. The second item is kind of a very unique situation. And sometimes it's hard for, people to kind of understand our unique environment that we work in, much like in, the fire service, as well as in EMS. We do 24-hour staffing in a facility where people live there, in this case, for 48-hour tours of duty, sometimes 72. And that represents very similar to their kind of own home environment. And it's very customary in those types of things out there that there's a lot of what I would call pride and ownership in the facility, and people will maintain it much like you maintain your own home, and whatever it takes to do that. And historically, our staff members have oftentimes, used their own, personal property and equipment to do that maintenance, whether that's, outside lawn maintenance, whether it's, actual, cleaning of carpets, whether it's, bringing in cookware, you name it, it's their home, and that's how it gets treated. So there have been some, changes in policy now, that have come across that has kind of changed that I guess, pride and ownership factor. No longer are employees allowed to use their own personal equipment for the benefit of the city, and we're left with a situation now where things are not being maintained or done because there is no availability of certain tools and equipment and that type of thing. So you can read what's in there, to get a little better grip of that. But we're asking to basically come up with what would be city-owned replacements for things that otherwise were, offered up by individuals. So. Other than that, the only other, thing I do want to kind of jump on board what Chief Hillenbrand said. As an EMS agency, we support those improvements to the Emergency Operations Center. It's a key operation out there. And we would like to, speak in favor of that. And, that's one of those things out there that, one of us had to essentially put it forth out there, and we were all kind of talking to each other. Well, should fire do it? Should EMS? Should, police? So the police chief agreed to do that, but yet it really affects multiple public safety providers. So we just would like to speak in support of that. Other than that, if you look at the actual, summary document, and talks about, goals and kind of future things out there, there's two things I just want to bring to the forefront. Number one is a reminder that, as our community grows, we have started exploring the idea of what does the regional EMS system look for, not just within the city of Middleton, but beyond the area, and what it does for our partners out there. And we know that there are areas, particularly in the northeast quadrant of Middleton, that are subject to, future growth and already are seeing increased call volumes. The same thing is happening in the town of Westport, which is served by Wanakee EMS. And we know that at some point in not too distant future, we're facing a situation where two independent EMS providers are both looking at what they're going to have to do to address that. And we know there is a great opportunity to do a much more efficient collaborative approach to that. In other words, if we were looking at adding another station to the northeast part of Middleton, and Wanakee is looking at adding a station in the southern part of Westport, it would be a horrible waste of resources to have that sort of duplication. We believe very strongly, and there has been interest in the past about getting discussions together about collaborative, building a single facility, doing something to actually, take that entire area and do it as a larger entity across an intergovernmental relationship. So that's something, on my radar screen. I think we really need to, reactivate, get those discussions going with all the stakeholders so that we can prepare, hopefully a better pathway forward rather than just operating in our own little, silos and hoping for the best. And I've always said, points, just to be realistic about it, these initiatives would not, quote, save money. What they would do is avoid spending as much money in order to accomplish the goals that we need. So that's one big initiative. And then the next initiative is, and which was mentioned last year, but I'm getting closer and closer to the point personally. And now we give you some degree of certainty. Mid-25 is when I will be, retiring from, my position. And I know we've had some, I guess, loose structures of succession planning that have been put out there, but I believe we do need to, in 2024, get a serious discussion about, what we will do moving forward to make sure that we're well positioned to, have all of those responsibilities passed on to the next successor. So other than that, that's all I have.
Great. I will just comment on your plans to retire and congratulate you in advance and suggest that if you really want to enjoy your retirement, don't run for public office. It'll take up a lot of your time having fun, but it's still a lot of time. And the proposed collaboration with Wanakee, I think sounds great. I believe there is now an innovation grant available as part of the whole shared revenue reworking, and there might be some funds available through that. I want to see if my colleagues have any questions. I did have one, because you mentioned, I'm looking at that AED replacements, and you mentioned doing half one year and half next year. It looks from the table like there would be half done in 24 and then the other half would be done 2 years later. Is that?
That might very well be. Yes, I didn't have the other schedule right in front of me here. And I knew it was going to be split, but you're probably correct. And the reason for that is there's been some acquisitions of newer ADs in the last, 5-6 years. And I wouldn't want to just, literally, turn around and dump those out the door, right away. So, but, at least rather than biting all the bullet up front, we can split that. And whether that be in 2 successive years or, a year between, that's okay too. So.
Okay, any questions from others? Alder Jackson?
None here. Thank you.
Okay, all right.
And
Thanks.
once again, congratulations on your retirement.
Not there yet. Okay, thank you. Moving on to planning.
And the planning budget narrative is on page 175 of the operating book.
And if you flip to 176, I want to start by highlighting 3 of the goals that we have in 2024. So these 13 goals listed on the screen here are the primary goals for our department. The 3 that I would like to highlight, the first is project management for the community campus plan. This is something that came up when Tammy was giving her budget presentation. And it's a project that we started pre-pandemic, and we've kind of gone in fits and starts. And the delay was largely due to the pandemic, but in more recent times, it's just due to my own workload as the lead staff assigned to the committee and to work with the consultants. And I do not like wasting consultant time, and I don't like wasting committee member time. So I have been reluctant to gather the group back together because our department has really been all hands on deck with the comp plan update and then all of the ordinances that we're bringing forward. But I would really like to get that project completed in 2024. The Common Council did prioritize that as one of the top strategic plan initiatives as well. The other 2 that I would like to highlight are numbers 11 and 12. And we've kind of linked those 2 together. We would like to update the subdivision ordinance and also update the bicycle and pedestrian plan in 2024. What that would enable is our department has 13 ordinances or chapters of the city code and plans, major city plans that we administer. And if we would be able to complete both of those in 2024, then we would have 9 of the 13 that would have been updated in the last 3 years. In 2020, that number was 0 of 13. So we're making really good progress. And this is assuming that the zoning, lighting, and sign code gets all adopted and finalized by the end of this year. And the other reason that we're linking those 2 together is we are requesting a capital budget item for the subdivision ordinance. We think that that's going to require a lot of technical expertise, where the bike ped plan, we think that if the council were to allocate funding for the subdivision ordinance, we could do the bike ped plan in-house. And we've actually already started working with our intern in our department to look at best practices and to kind of gather some of the really, really good examples of active modes plans. So significant issues in 2024. The first is probably the same as every city department, which is just the workload and keeping up with the level of projects with the small staff of 4.5 FTE that we have. We have a couple of things coming online that we think are really going to help us a lot with efficiency. One is the adoption of the new codes. In the short term, we're going to see a lot fewer applications for rezonings and conditional use permits. So that's less staff time writing staff reports, responding to resident inquiries, making sure that we're documenting public feedback, putting out public hearing notices, doing mailers to neighborhoods. So in the short term, that will help us a lot. In the long term, we will have many fewer planned development districts, and that I've mentioned it several times during the zoning code update. That's really what we're trying to get away from with the new code, because we have over 70 that we're administering right now. The second thing that's really going to help us with efficiency is that Brent is helping us right now to completely overhaul our websites. So right now it's kind of hard to find things on all of the pages for our department. They haven't been updated regularly.
And we spend a lot of time talking to developers, property owners, realtors, and residents about questions. We don't have a front office staff person who answers the calls for us. So we take all of those calls and we spend so much time on the phone, when I think if we can do a little bit better job on the front end, getting information out, that would help us be more efficient with that on that side of things. So going to our operating budget, there's very minimal change. We're requesting an increase in revenue, and it's due to the fee increases that we implemented in January of 2023. I mentioned that applications for rezonings and CUPs is going to decrease, but we still think that this number is conservative based on previous years. We also expect that there will be a decrease in our advertising and marketing budget because we use that for hearing notices, but we are not proposing a change at this time, because one of the things we'd like to keep in our back pocket is the possibility of trying to work with property owners to rezone them out of PDDs. And in exchange, we would cover the cost to handle all of the notification requirements for that once the new code is in place. So that is it for operating. On the capital budget side, we put forward 10 capital budget requests, and I'll give Bill a minute to pull those up. I think it's page 15 of the capital. So the first item on our list is the electric vehicle infrastructure build out. And this item, we have 150,000 in right now as a placeholder. Kelly is working with Raymaker right now on a project and we hope that we'll have firmed up numbers over the course of the budget process. Kelly did let me know earlier this morning that we are going to be able to begin some of the construction work for the infrastructure build out, at least at the Terrace Avenue parking lot behind the library. That will happen this year using 2023 dollars. But this is to complete the full scale upgrade. I'll skip over number 2. I think it's straightforward. Number 3, this is kind of new, and I'm not sure if the city has done this before, but given the amount of funding that we expect to be coming through and the success that Kelly has had in securing grants for sustainability initiatives, we would like to put this forward as a placeholder amount of $100,000 that would enable us to have matching funds available as opportunities present themselves. Obviously, all of those would still have to go through the normal budget process and be approved by the Common Council. Number 4, you'll notice that there is not a capital request. That's because this would be entirely grant funded. And Daphne has been working with the Wisconsin Historical Society on this, and it would be a full survey of all historic properties and effigy mounds in the community, and it would be fully funded by grant. Number 5, we had put this forward as a TIP District 5 initiative with the cost to be determined. I went back and looked in my email earlier today, and I started working on securing these cost estimates in July of 2022. It is a very complicated project. It would involve undergrounding utilities along University Avenue. So that means working with at least 3 utility providers. We've had some success getting some of the information we need from 2 of the 3. Unfortunately, despite the amount of time and effort that we have put into gathering this information, I do not think it's going to be feasible for us to complete this project next year. We have requested some assistance from our TIF engineering firm and our TIF planning firm to try to put together some meetings with several people to get them all in the same room so that we can explain the importance of this project to them and see if we can get the information that we need to do that work. The other parts of implementing the University Avenue corridor plan would include signalized and non-signalized crossing upgrades for pedestrian and bicycle safety and landscaping. And those parts of the project would be relatively straightforward. So we can put together pretty firm numbers for that, but we really need cooperation from the utilities to get the information to underground. The subdivision ordinance rewrite, I already talked about. That is a firm cost estimate now that we have from the firm that we would prefer to work with on the project. Obviously, we would go through the normal city process if that was approved in the budget and get that approved through the Common Council. Item 7, the multi-use path on the east side of Allen Boulevard. We're still working with the property owner that we will need to acquire some additional land from. So far, we have not been successful. They're very concerned about the loss of parking and have asked us to explore the possibility of adding parking on Lake Street as part of the Lake Street redesign. So I've worked with Public Works on that, and Sean, I know, has a consultant on board to do that project now. And so they are looking into whether we have the right of way necessary to do that. And then number 8, we had some good news and we had some bad news from the county. I guess I'll start with the bad news. On the trail easement acquisition, the bad news is that the county has determined that they would only fund up to 50% of the cost of the easement acquisition. But the good news is that I think I had previously reported to the Common Council that they wanted us to complete that by the end of this year, or else the funds were not going to roll over. And they have said that at least their staff person has said that they are open to an extension. So I think it'll kind of come out in a wash, assuming that we're able to secure the easements that we need next year. And that's assuming that we're able to get them under agreement to extend the contract for that Dane County grant. So that is all I have on the capital side, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Abby. Does anybody have any questions for Abby?
None here.
Okay, thank you. I had a question about the intern. When was the last time wages were increased for the intern? Right now it's set at $8,480.
So we did increase wages with consent from HR to 15 an hour. The intern that we have presently has a master's degree in planning. So we got that increase. What that meant is that we got fewer hours of their time.
Okay. And then thinking about Stonehorse Green management, is there any talk of trying to find a really good fit for that particular activity that's not necessarily on planning's plate?
It is funded currently through the CDA. I think that we would certainly welcome any thoughts that the council has on, shifting that to another area within the city, if that's something that you're interested in. We had also been interested in trying to get the position to full-time, with the possibility of trying to take some of the other duties that are on the other 4 of us currently, community development related duties in particular. And I think that would really help us with hiring and keeping someone long-term. But it's also a challenging position to fit into with another position. It would really rely so heavily on getting the right person in the role. What I would love to see is for us to get another like associate planner type person who could also handle that, but that position is going to require a lot of evenings and weekend hours. And I know like for a salaried position, that can be a challenge for recruiting. So right now we're working with someone who is a consultant, who organizes a very large event, and that's their primary consulting role. They organize a large event in the South, but they can only guarantee that they are willing to stay with us through the end of this year.
Okay. And then my last question is looking at staffing of committees. I think you have, is it 14 within planning? Any thoughts on consolidation?
I think I had mentioned previously that there is some overlap between the CDA and the Arts Committee. I don't know if they could entirely be consolidated. I think where we really appreciate flexibility from the council, and it has not always been the case in the past, is for the ability for us to be able to schedule meetings on an as needed basis. Previously we had received direction that committees needed to meet every month. That is really a challenge from a staffing standpoint. So what we would prefer is, for some of our committees, and I know workforce housing in particular, they actually decided that they were going to go to a quarterly schedule, at least for the time being. I think that really provides flexibility and it helps us use staff time more efficiently.
Okay, Perhaps that can be a committee of the whole discussion item.
I think it's a great idea.
Okay, any other questions for Abby? Hearing none. Thank you, Abby.
Thank you.
Okay, and next we have library. That's on page 198 of the operating book.
All right, good evening, Jocelyn Sansing, your Public Library Director. Starting on page 190, looking at our major responsibilities and goals for the following year, they're directly related to our strategic plan, which is on the next following pages. But really our major responsibilities of the library have remained the same. But how we're doing those and the way that people are accessing them is definitely changing. And we're really building a lot of data around how we're observing and noticing these things and how we're making decisions based on some of that data. So significant issues in 2024 also remain the same. So these issues have been pretty much listed in some form along these lines for the last 5 years. The facility we have outgrown. In 2015 is when that last feasibility study was done. And since then, using no new net revenue nor any capital funding, entirely using library fund balance and fundraising, we have remodeled the entire building. We have also expanded the square footage available for public reservations and also addressed several mechanical issues and plans for improvement in the future. So we don't have any capital budget this year or requests moving forward. It's just the placeholder for HVAC support. Trends and demands in public libraries. We are not keeping up with trends and demands in community libraries in Dane County. Our ranking amongst our Dane County peers has slowly declined, and we are still trying to recover from the pandemic. So related to COVID, we have rebounded all services, expanded several arenas, but we have yet to reopen on Sundays. This is the one thing that's left over from the pandemic closure that we still are trying to regain from. So as we look at our intergovernmental funding from Dane County, our cross-county border reimbursements, and then the resolution that council passes every year for the general transfer in from the city fund, we have looked from that city piece as only a 1.9% annual average increase since 2019. So our transfer in has not been keeping up with our costs. The page 192 is the library's strategic roadmap. Detailed examples of this work. Excuse me. Detailed examples of this work can be found on midlibrary.org/board. And the two that I'd like to point out, the second one, focus area, number 2 of civic engagement, align the goals of the Middleton Public Library with the goals of the city of Middleton. Everything that we do, we're continually looking at how can we align and leverage the library for greater civic engagement for all city departments. The library is a really great entry point for a lot of civic engagement and city introduction to city services, and that continues to be a priority. And then under place and space, that third item, continue to plan for the long-term future by participating in the community campus plan. We're ready to move forward with that and continue to support staff, especially Abby, however we can. Before we get into the quick initiatives, I want to look at just a quick overview of our workload statistics. So we've gone several years now since the beginning of the pandemic, and we're starting to really see how the data is informing the way that we're providing service. So our actual physical circulation has been on the decline since 2017, which is really following national trends, which has been happening since the dawning of the internet. People are still reading, they're just reading in different ways. Our physical readership here in Middleton is still pretty high per capita compared to other places around the state of Wisconsin. The registered borrowers members is not just the city of Middleton. It also includes anyone that lives within the South Central Library system. So just under 11% of that total 18,962 cardholders is outside of Middleton. The next two items, related to link libraries, this is all of our holds. So the number of items that we lend out to other libraries that share our catalog and the number of items that we borrow. These numbers have completely flipped since 2017, and they're also included as hard and fast numbers within that Dane County reimbursement. So there's a variety of performance factors that go into that reimbursement that make up that Dane County portion of the library's budget. This is not necessarily a bad thing, but it definitely looks for the library staff as a change in our workflow. So rather than pulling more items off of our shelves and processing them to send them away, we're receiving more items. Therefore, our hold shelving is expanding. So these are the sorts of trends that we look at to help determine how our operations should flow. And then lastly, the number of books owned, audiovisual owned, in comparison to our digital use has also started to switch. So while our inventory has slowly declined, the number of digital uses, including ebooks, magazines, audio databases, is really spiking. So our three initiatives are related to the cost to maintain. This is just the cost to continue library services. The 230 books account along with the 440 training and development. Neither of these accounts have had any sort of increase for the last decade. We have been cost to maintain in these two areas, for 10 years. The second initiative is related to the bookmobile. The library board has been working with LDV along with the city garage staff to secure a vehicle for mobile library services. This estimated delivery time of August of 2024, and will also be undergoing a fundraising campaign with the Friends of the Library. This will be publicly announced in a big splashy way within the next month or so. And this is also a great way for us to be able to continue expanding services beyond just the library and support a lot of activities that we're already doing in the community, and also look to how can we reach more people that might have trouble coming to the library or would otherwise come to the library on a Sunday. Last initiative is the seasonal Sunday hours. This is the cost to increase and be open Sundays, seasonally Sunday, Labor Day to Memorial Day. I know it's been a long evening and you've had a lot of data thrown at you, but I just have one more visual image here of the Dane County libraries. I think Bill's going to bring that up in just a moment. So of all of the libraries within Dane County, there's, I believe, 29, including all of the Madison locations. We are there on the left, every public library within the county. And then on the right, this is the libraries that offer Sunday services. The ones with the stars are year round. So this is Verona, Stoughton, Monona, Sun Prairie, DeForest, and Wanakee. The three in the center are Madison locations, which are seasonal. And so you can see we're leaving the entire side of the western side of the county without service. Any questions that I can answer?
Members, do you have any questions? Alder Jackson?
Yes, just one quick question. So what is the holdup on why you guys can't open up on Sundays?
Well, they're proposing to open next year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
To which
Right.
I say yay.
Yeah, I said the same thing. That's why I'm like, yay, let's get it open on Sundays.
But just to be clear and to answer the question more directly, it comes down to, again, to funding for staff to be able to provide that service, which we don't presently have.
Okay.
think that map was very telling too.
Yeah.
That's a really good visual.
Any other questions, Alder Jackson?
No, thank you.
I had a question. Drew mentioned earlier the possibility of integrating IT between the
Yes,
library and the
yes.
city.
Mhm.
Is it going to be possible to have library board meetings, the agendas and things, and on base like the other city committees, commissions and
Yes.
boards?
Mhm.
That'd be great. And then finally, I noted the footage of the library is too small. Is that something that could be served with a satellite facility, perhaps in the northern part of the?
Yes, adding another location is always the logical entrepreneurial mindset, business approach to providing service. There are a lot of implications with duplicating services at another location. And generally speaking, a tax base of a population of 50 to 80,000 is where we start to see branch services added. So mobile library services is definitely the best way that we can continue to expand that right now while we continue to invest in our downtown anchor.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? If not, thank you.
Thank you.
And members, it is 9 o'clock, but I say we just plow ahead since we're so close. And
Yeah.
Kylie's already taking the
we have-
voting.
Park and Rec coming up next. Depending on the committee's interest, we could cover some of the admin services at a future meeting. Obviously, we'll
Okay.
be at all of those. So next would be Park and Recreation, page 151 of the operating book to start. If you wanted to use your other presentation.
No,
just let me know.
that's okay. I'm just, this is my first year. I wasn't sure what to expect, so.
Okay.
And maybe overly prepared on that. All right, so just kind of going through the following page. I don't know the page numbers here, but the next page with goals, if you can turn to that one. We've gone through a large transition with staffing. At the end of the year, it'll be 5 new staff out of our 12 full-time staff. So with that, our goal for 2024 is really to lay a solid foundation and take a look and review policies and procedures and go through strategic marketing and communications internally, externally with the department. And just a lot of that cleanup and setting a solid foundation for everyone to be highly efficient and effective with our services. And then another goal that we have is providing quality recreation programs. So we'll be looking at adding special event to provide more revenue that will help subsidize some of our other programming, and growing our adult services is definitely needed, and youth sports. We're also going to take a look at that and areas we can grow. We are also within maintenance and development of our open spaces. We really want to look at planning instead of being reactive with maintenance. We want to take a look at asset inventorying and going through replacement programs and making sure we have everything accounted for, and using technology to help our staff in that area. And promoting social equity is another goal. Taking a look through our agreements that we have with various organizations, and then also just trying to reduce barriers, increase participation. Our youth center and scholarship funding, we want to try to look at creating goals around that as well. And then one of our final pieces there is professional development and creating a financial plan for development of our whole team, so that we can continue providing high-level services. So that's just high-level look at our goals for our department. And then leading into our operational budget, we have a lot of initiatives there, but just to go through high level, there are several areas where I took a look back 6 years back and just tried to bring some of those items up to what we have been spending over that last 6 years, and then as well as inflation. And then I worked on trying to consolidate a lot of account lines. So that may get a little bit confusing, but hopefully I can help explain anything within that. And we are hoping to, are working to increase program revenue, specifically through aquatics as well. And then, another initiative we have is the Oak Hill Correctional support we have within our conservancy and forestry management. We partner with their supervisor had increased $13 an hour. And that went into effect in July of this year. So we're just trying to better budget for next year with still allocating that number of hours for Oak Hill. And then our youth center operations, we want to continue working towards viable funding for that. So we're going to be looking at trying to increase grant funds in the future and making a more sustainable plan for that as well, with ARPA funding diminishing there. So that, and then seasonal staffing, we really want to have taken a look at wage scale all the way across and want to ensure that we're remaining competitive with our seasonal support staff. We have a lot of challenges within our aquatics, within our parks, and our parks seasonal. And so those two areas are highly needed to take a look at making sure they're competitive. And then forestry services, that was something that was identified by our park rec and forestry commission, that they wanted to look at elevating the forestry services. So those are a few budget items that they had added to the mix there. And then jumping into our capital, we have a lot of capital requests in there, but just a high level go over, we have aquatic facility improvements, and those are trying to complete all of our filter, pump, and check valves for all of our circulation through our filter pumps, so that will all be completed before by the end of 2024. And then we have our playground replacement program that we skipped a year last year. So looking to get back on point with that. Our second spray for spongy moth suppression. We did our first one that was very successful for the community. And we've heard from them that the second spray is very important. And then we want to continue with our project that we completed with the Creek Corridor trail restoration, just with restoring the land around the trail and invasive species removal and getting more species vegetated in there as well. And another high point is our Bach Hayfield Prairie conversion. There's 6 acres of grass field, and we're looking at converting that into a prairie that will connect Orchid Heights Park all the way. The road is Highland Way. So all of that space would be prairie and connect that piece. So I just went through a lot of that high level wise, but kind of my last thing is that I just want to thank our staff team for working with me, our whole entire staff team, and the park staff team for helping me get here today. So
thank you.
But questions?
I noted that in I guess in 2022, your budget was cut or reduced by the city by $80,000, which was not consistent with previous years. Is there any mention of, to staying on track with that, maybe getting that back? So in the sense of
what budget was cut 80,000? I'm so sorry.
In 2022, Mark mentioned that, it said that.
Oh, that was probably the capital improvement plan for the conservancy budget request. When the requests come in, that $80,000 maybe wasn't approved, but the projects that were approved, we're still working on completing this year. So I think making sure that staff can manage all of that as well as.
Just want to make sure that whatever was given up, you get back.
Yeah, I don't know if that's how.
Well, you're talking about the last year it was cut for this year's budget. Yeah, that was largely because of all the borrowing we had to do for the Pheasant Branch Conservancy restoration.
Yeah.
I had, go ahead. If you have more. Okay. I have a couple of questions. First of all, thank you so much for everything you do. And I'm so glad to see Graber Pond restoration and the master plan update on the list. Can you tell me what's the status of the Conservancy lands plan, which I know we funded for
This year.
amending or adding to this year?
So that is on the docket right now. And I have to follow up with Mark to see where it's at, but it's supposed to be started within the next month, which I wish it was completed by the end of this year, but I'm hoping we can get there with it. It's a rewrite of the 5-year plan for Conservancy.
Okay. Looking at Graber Pond and Middleton Hills restorations, they're both in District 6. I recall reading in the narrative that the Graber Pond Conservancy ranked higher than the Middleton Hills for work. So I'm wondering why Graber is 10,000 and Middleton Hills is 20.
For allocated funds or for initiative numbers?
For initiatives.
For initiative. I know that was heavily looked at in for initiative, moved around a couple times within the committee. So I don't have a really good response for that right now, but I can take a look into it.
Yeah, that would be great. And then on the social equity front, I'm looking at page 159 of the operating budget, according to my pagination. It mentions Halloween and Christmas events that were free, but now they're going to have a charge. So I have 2 questions about that. One, what about families in need now having to pay a fee? Is it possible to just do a suggested donation instead? And then second, did you mean to say Christmas or is it more holiday events? And again, this is page 159 of the operating budget.
I meant to say holiday. So that can be updated. I don't know. Okay. But I can just speak while you're looking through that. I can just speak to our Halloween event is actually
167, Bill.
Is actually brand new to the community this year. And so that is at the lowest cost that we can provide still with the event, with people getting a pumpkin and then also being able to have all the activities. It's helping subsidize for some of our other programs that we offer, and a special event takes a large amount of staff resources and volunteerism to carry out. So I think with that event being brand new to our community, that's the goal for that one. We're working to try to increase our sustainability for our scholarship program, which really needs to be taken a look at. And I think that's a way that we can fold it into the future with using a special event revenue. Also, with the holiday event or candy cane hunt, we were looking to reformat that with it being $5 per person. It still is relatively affordable for the community. And with the value that they get with family photos or digital family photos and candy canes and all the supplies that we purchase for it and the resources, I think it's a fair fee for the community.
Okay. I wonder if there's an opportunity to use some of our ARPA funds to build the scholarship fund. And maybe I think we've talked about this before with regard to the swimming passes. Like, is there a way to partner with Way Forward Resources to provide free or discounted admission for people who are clients at Way Forward? And then speaking of the ARPA funds, I noted that the youth center is dropping the 20K allocation that we had, or award for 2024. I would consider you to rethink that and keep that. And if anything, you could probably increase the amount of ARPA funding that you receive to cover the budget for the youth center. I know it's one-time only funding. It's not sustainable for positions, but since it has been used for the last 2 years for a position, it could be fine to do it again and then also cover your operating expenses. That'll take a little bit off of the general fund.
Yeah, I agree with that. I know we discussed ARPA funds in the youth center a little bit and just trying to take a look at that a little further.
I believe there will be strong support for that.
Yeah, we have a pretty or a better plan for 2025. So it's kind of in that interim that we still need a little bit more support to get there.
Yep, and we'd be happy to help you get there. Okay, if there are no further questions, thank you, Kylie, for sticking around. Okay, members, we can decide now. Bill made the offer to punt the admin and other slots to another time. Thoughts?
How many more slots?
We have 2.
I would vote we just bully through, but that's my opinion.
Alder Jackson.
Get it done.
Hey, I'm with you guys. We can bully through if you want to.
All right.
I'm at work, but I can still hang in here.
Okay.
So I'll be brief for council admin. There's 3 small curtailed items. Council just a request to add some additional training. Since we had a changeover in council. Sorry, the request was for some additional training dollars for council, just because we had a changeover in council in the last couple of years. So just thought there's more opportunity for council members who want to get up to speed on a number of different issues. So that's that for admin. For administration, really a couple items. One, there was a request for us to consider moving from a kind of static PDF-based way of hosting our city ordinances, which is what we have up on our website now, moving towards more of a, it's not automated, but easily updated hosted service for the city's code of ordinances. Muni Code is the primary one that does it across the country. It's tough to get a firm number from them without kind of going a little bit further down in the process with them. I bet about 10 grand for a community of our size, given our size of ordinance for that. And then some additional professional development for the new communications position, because that wasn't in the budget prior to the referendum, that position being approved. And then some tools to help boost our efficiency in posting to social media.
Okay, and then moving on to administrative services and with the initiatives. The first is some operating line item adjustments. The increase is primarily associated with the increase in auditing fees from the proposal we recently approved with Baker Tilly. There's a couple other line item adjustments. Communications, I think we can reduce as we're starting to see some of the savings from having moved to the voice over IP system and transitioning some of the TDS lines. There should be some savings this year, and I think we can reduce that budget for 2024. And proposing we redirect that money into what's called the data processing line. That is really our costs for iSolved for our payroll and HR system. So then we're left with the increase is really in that auditing services line item. The other initiatives are related to human resources. Number 2 is the addition of a staff person for a human resources generalist. I'll let Brian Wilhopter speak to this, but just want to preface it by saying that we are, I think, unique for a city of our size with our number of employees to only have one full-time dedicated HR position. We're very fortunate to have Brian with his skill and expertise, but especially with all of the recruitment and onboarding and activities we have right now. It's a lot on one person, and we don't have a backup plan of a second person. There is some support provided by the city clerk as HR assistant, but we're very reliant on Brian trying to do everything and wear all the HR hats at once.
Yeah, for a city between 1 and 250 employees generally, the HR standard is about 3.4 HR personnel to support an organization of that size. There is some subtly inverse relationship. Smaller organizations tend to have a higher ratio of personnel just to cover the main support pieces. I am able to maintain basic passive recruiting to support recruiting and backfill of positions, basic policy maintenance, mentorship of department heads on personnel issues, investigations into issues in the city, and maintain the most basic level of compliance with FLSA, FMLA, ADA, and OSHA. I am not able to do broad organizational development, employee and whole organizational training development, talent management to include extended and active recruiting, and succession planning support for any of the departments, development of safety to include establishment of a safety committee, which the city has never had. Those are all the things that are beyond my capacity as the sole HR staff member for the city. Lori does help. She does some benefits administration for me. The rest of the functions she performs is payroll. Payroll is a finance function, not an HR function. Very little direct support for the HR functions for the city. I've been here about 3 years, and the number of initiatives that we've put through have been pretty significant, but the list gets longer each year instead of shorter.
And then the final item under admin services is an additional $1,200 for additional HR recruiting efforts and memberships. I also want to touch on elections. There's one initiative, which is a combination of all of the factors related to 4 elections, including the presidential election year. Lori has that broken down by area. The primary expenses for election workers with staffing that number of elections and looking at having additional stations for the presidential election and the primary. I think she's looking at having 5 dedicated check-in stations so that you can have a couple of those dedicated to new registrations at each polling place, plus continue to have the books divided up and just try to keep on top of things and have a manageable line. Also anticipating a high level of absentee activity as we've seen with the major elections. So the elections area is a budget that fluctuates from year to year, and off years that comes down, but we're anticipating an increase, and the additional staff cost is the largest portion of that for elections. We also have listed on here other and risk management. There are some small increases to non-departmental. I'd say the largest increase we're looking at is to the risk management budget. And risk management, which is our insurance and claims payments, we budget as an internal service fund with charges to different funds. The general fund portion of that, we are looking at a $50,000 increase from $350,000 to $400,000 for next year. We're seeing increases across all insurance premium categories. Our liability insurance, we are locked in with a 2% increase for 2024, but we're seeing larger increases in property coverage, auto physical damage that's related to inflation and higher costs for replacement of vehicles and facilities. We're also seeing a large increase in workers' comp. That's a combination of, as our payroll size grows for our employees and our compensation, that goes up. And also, unfortunately, our workers' comp mod factor based on our claims history has gone up. So the combination of all of those, we're looking at that $50,000 allocation. I will say we have a sizable fund balance in the risk management fund, approximately $400,000. We do want to keep a fund balance there so that if we have larger claims, we have a source that we can draw upon. We've had a bad year with a couple of larger claims. So I wouldn't want to tap all of that, but that is something that we can look at if we want to phase in that increase over a couple of years. Potentially, we could draw down on some of the fund balance for that. those are really the main items I want to touch on right now. We will have recommendations for contingency levels that'll be part of the proposed budget. Yeah, unless there are questions, if there's anything else I need to cover tonight.
Just one other item, since it does fall under administration. Airport, the operations, the operating budget piece is staying pretty consistent with what it was for 2023. No major changes proposed there. The only capital item that is I have in 2024, but might actually be a placeholder and need to get moved back to 25 because I'm waiting on some cost information from the Bureau of Aeronautics is our airport, like a couple of other airports in the area, operates an automated weather observing system. And that piece of infrastructure is coming to near the end of its life. So that's something that would need to be replaced. It would be eligible to be funded, at least vast majority of it, through the BOA's petition process. So that's something I'm working through with BOA staff now. The other piece of kind of technology that would need to be replaced in the near future is the localizer system. That's my understanding. It's a navigation system that the airport operates. That I'm still waiting for some cost data from the BOA on. So that might get shifted to an out year once I have a sense of the order of magnitude of that. But that's the only item that's being contemplated from a capital standpoint in 24.
Okay, thank you. Questions or comments from the members?
I just have one question about the Muni code. That 10,000, is that just based on your experience in past on using them, or is that a quote? Or
that's a quote from them. So
that is a quote from them.
I gave them kind of some of the general, population size, gave them access to our website to see what we got. Again, until you kind of go down the road with them, pick what options you want. They won't give you a firm price, but based upon the variables, I gave them $10,000 as a placeholder.
And that's a recurring annual fee.
I'd have to go back and look at the information. The reason why I think that's why I put it in operating as opposed to capital, because it was a reoccurring cost, but I'll check on that.
And I would wonder if there is another upfront cost just to get it implemented.
And I think that number goes down, so in year 2, it's less than 10,000 because the implementation is baked into that 10,000.
Perfect. Thank you.
I will say that of all the exciting things in this budget,
Please tell me that's not it.
Unicode investment is the most exciting for me. I'm thrilled about that.
I would use it a lot.
Yeah, I would too. I have a question about the intern pay. So it looks like we've been paying an intern $10,000 every year since 2018. So have the hours decreased for that position, or are they just not earning enough?
It depends. So when I started in May of 2000, whatever year it was, it's 9:30, almost 9:30.
It was last year.
I understand we had an intern for a couple of years. I had somebody start the summer that I started. They ended up leaving to take another position out of the country, actually. And just with the volume of workload, it didn't make sense for me to try to bring another intern back on. So this is a conversation that I can have with the finance committee and the admin staff. It will be a struggle for me to manage another intern on top of everything else. So if that pool of money needs to get relocated elsewhere, I'm open to that conversation. But I say that knowing once you make that change, it's very difficult to get that back in an out year if you ever wanted it back. But we do have a number of great interns in the building. So I'm willing to have that conversation if, as we'll talk about in the next meeting, we'll have to make some tough decisions on things that are, clearly stuff we want to fund, but we can't because of money. And if $10,000 helps move the needle on some things, I'm open to that.
Okay. And then on the capital side, there's only one for administration. It's the enterprise ERP software. And I'm wondering, is that something that we could do maybe an RFP in 2024 and implement it in 2025?
Yeah, I think that's a possibility. And thanks for bringing that up. I did want to mention that we have had in the capital improvement planning process in the past, looking at a replacement for our financial software. And this would be looking at trying to incorporate that with a system that would also have payroll and HR in an integrated system. Right now, our financial system, as far as I can tell, it looks like it's about 20 years ago that we had purchased it. They've had some I'd say more incremental upgrades along the way. But there's a lot of things that it can't do. And for a city of our size, there are certainly more robust tools that are out there. We find that we use a lot of spreadsheets, as you see during the budget process. There really is not a budgeting tool within that software. So we end up exporting all of our information to spreadsheets. We work on it and manipulate all of that in spreadsheets and with the departments. And at the very end, we import it back in. That's also true for a lot of the specialized project accounting and specialized reporting. So we end up spending a lot of staff time creating and updating those reports, where it would be great to have a system that's integrated and has dashboards and tools and can do more with workflow and integration. As this request was put in here, it was shown as a possibility of looking at ARPA funding if there are remaining ARPA funds in 2024. However, I recognize that both there are likely going to be other demands on those ARPA funding. And it's not just the initial cost, but trying to work in the operating cost into a tight operating budget and seeing how tight that is this year. I know that's going to be a challenge. Also, with it being a presidential election year, it would not be a good year to be trying to implement a new payroll and integrated HR system. So I do think it's important that the city consider this at some point in the future, and that is something that we could continue to research, potentially look at an RFP, and then look at future funding.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions? Hearing none, thank you. All right, we appear to be at the end of our agenda. Is that correct? Do we need to pick a date for to replace the November? Or do you want to do that at our next finance committee meeting?
I think we can wait till the next one.
All right, since we have reached the end of our.
Can I just ask, would
ahead.
everyone be okay with starting at 5:30 on our next regular meeting on October 3rd? Potentially give us about an hour for budget from 5:30 to 6:30 before getting into the regular business.
Sure.
Okay.
Yes.
Fine with me.
Okay.
October 3rd, starting at 5:30. Okay, and I know that the band concerts are the 15th and 16th, and
No, the band concert is just the 15th.
but there's another, they're like,
Oh, the 8th grade one. Yeah, the senior one is the next night.
yeah, and that's my kid. So we'll have to
You
be,
can send out an email and try to find possible future dates.
I don't know if people are willing to meet during the day instead of at night, but yeah, we'll figure it out. Okay, well, we've reached the end of our agenda, so we are adjourned. Good night, Alder Jackson.
Good night, guys. Enjoy the meeting.